I made the announcement this morning, but I am going to state it again at the beginning of this show, and we'll get into detail as to why. I have engaged my legal team to begin the process to sue Kamala Harris and her campaign for defamation that I believe is so shockingly egregious. I'm not sure that there could be I'm not sure the statement they made about me could be any more extreme. I believe it is the most egregious it could possibly be. We'll get into that on the show, and I'll explain where we're currently at and what they said. It took a clip from the show out of context and then just barreled on a bunch of insane fabrications, accusing me of calling for the what is tantamount to genocide among those who refuse to support Trump if he wins. And it is false, defamatory in the extreme. And again, we'll discuss that. But we're going to talk about a lot more than that, because the question around this is more than just about me personally, and that we will be, I'll stress this right now. Lawyers are engaged. They are doing the work. We will file when we file, but it is our full intention to go the full route, file the lawsuit. I'm very, very angry about this. But there are a lot of stories around Kamala Harris right now, particularly with claims of deceit, lies. We got a story out of Philadelphia where an ad campaign popped up all over the city claiming that Kamala was the official candidate of the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles said this is a lie. This is not true. We don't know. I'm not saying that Kamala Harris put those things up. We don't know who did. But she's also been accused of spreading the suckers hoax about Donald Trump and soldiers. We'll talk about that. And then in the news, Nate Silver is predicting Donald Trump to win right now at around 57%, which is huge. Looking at the polling with some polls showing that Trump is going to win the blue wall states, they call it. We'll talk about that. We got a story about Chicago, Venezuelan migrants taking over an apartment building. And then we got some really big news. Turkey wants to join BRICS. A video of naval U.S. service members being attacked. One man having a bag pulled over his head in Turkey. Things are getting absolutely crazy. And a lot more. Biden saying the Secret Service won't let him go outside anymore. Won't let him go to big rallies. We'll talk about that. Before we get started, my friends, head over to castbrew.com. Support our work with buying coffee. But more importantly, go to timcast.com. Click join us. Become a member. Because if you support the work that we're doing, and we are going to need your support now more than ever, we need you guys to go to timcast.com and click join us and become a member. Lawsuits are expensive. And I do not make this decision lightly. My family is distressed. They're extremely angry. We'll get into, again, the story in just a minute, but we're going to need help to be able to fight through this one. And we don't know what's going to happen. We don't. We just know the one thing for sure. It's going to be extremely expensive. And I made the decision to move forward on this without knowing whether or not you guys would be backing us in our endeavors at this company. So again, go to timcast.com, click join us, become a member if you support our work. We really do need it. Smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Joining us tonight to talk about this and so much more is Clay Travis.
Appreciate you guys having me. It's going to be a lot of fun. Sounds like a wild time to be swinging by. I'm on for 3 hours every day when I added 3 hours here with you guys tonight. I'm excited to be here. And we got, 9 weeks in a day?
That's crazy.
9 weeks in a day, 64 tomorrow. By the time people wake up, we'll be officially 9 weeks out.
So what where do you primarily, where's your show and what do you primarily cover?
Yeah, so I do the Clay Travis Buck Sexton show every day from noon to 3 Eastern on 500 some odd AM FM stations. We took over after Rush Limbaugh died, so I've been working with Buck for a little bit over 3 years now daily. But I come out of the world of sports. I love football. We're football season here. And I run still Outkick.com, which I would say is a sane version of sports if people have not checked it out before. And I sold that company to Fox about 3 years ago. And so I run Outkick. I do 3 hours of daily radio with Buck. I still do a lot of sports. And I'm on Fox News fairly regularly as a part of them buying Outkick. So I feel like I've got like 20 jobs. And the best is I get to say exactly what I think. And in this world, that to me is the ultimate privilege because there's so many people out there. Probably the number one thing I hear when I'm out and about is you say what I wish I could say. And I'm sure for a huge percentage of your audience, people have to make mortgage payments. They got to take care of their kids. They can't necessarily fight back against all the chaos they see every day. So I feel incredibly fortunate to get to speak for a lot of people who don't feel like they have that luxury.
Right on. Should be fun. Thanks for hanging out.
I appreciate y'all having me.
We got Libby hanging out.
I'm Libby Emmons with the Post Millennial. I'm glad to be here hanging out.
I'm glad you're hanging out too. I think you sound exactly like a sports broadcaster. Every time you talk, I just think, yes, of course this guy wrote about football.
Well, and think about how crazy it is. You used to be able to just say, hey, I think so-and-so is going to win the game. And then I would say COVID happened. And in many ways, the fact that I'm still not over it, but the fact that they didn't let kids play high school sports, the fact that some blue states demanded that if you played basketball, you had to wear a mask while you're doing it. And now they want to snap their fingers, sort of mission Men in Black style and just pretend none of this ever happened.
They're over it. They don't want to talk about it.
They don't want to talk about the fact they were wrong on everything. So that's where I came from. Yeah.
I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer for scnr.com at Scanner News. Check out our work at Timcast News on the internet. Let's get started.
Here's the story from the Post Millennial. Tim Pool announces plan to sue Kamala Harris campaign for defamation because even though I'm literally sitting here and I'm going to tell you all about it, we always source our stories.
Libby, do you know about this source? Have you heard of it before?
Not only have I heard about this source, but I wrote this story.
Indeed.
Wow, that's incredible.
So we'll cut to the chase. I tweeted I've engaged legal counsel. We are preparing to take action. More to come. There's a lot that I cannot discuss for obvious reasons. And I will stress that in most circumstances, and basically in all of them, where you've heard me discuss our legal challenges, legal issues, our lawsuits, we never discuss details. However, this story is largely political. It is a massively viral video from Kamala HQ that has 11.5 million views. So this wasn't one of their passive posts. This is one of their, I should just say it's a very large post. The Harris campaign posted, Trump operatives say their Project 2025 plan is to give Trump total unchecked legal power so they can jail and execute those who don't support Trump if he wins. They have since scrubbed this video from YouTube. So I'm just going to come out right and say, I am not a Trump operative. I have never received any money from Trump's associates, or anything to do with Donald Trump. This company has received zero investment. This company is built from the ground up from my personal savings at first, then sponsorship revenue, which came from various companies like, gold companies and things like that, but largely programmatic ads that I don't even know what they are. So when these videos appear on YouTube, YouTube runs ads. I don't know what they are. Using that money to invest, I have received no money from anybody. I have nothing to do with Project 2025. I have zero association at all with anybody, anything to do with this. And the closest thing is they've appeared on the show at some point. And but in any way having to do with Project 2025 is absurd and not true. I have never called for total unchecked legal power for anyone. In fact, I've argued against it. And I oppose the death penalty in all circumstances and have routinely argued on this show the death penalty is wrong. And I do not trust the government to decide who gets to live and die. To make the claim that I am calling for that is shockingly insane. I do not believe there is a more extreme thing you could say about a person that other than to indicate they were calling for the genocide of political factions in a country that refuse to support a presidential candidate should he win. And for this, we are suing we are pursuing this legal action. So there's a lot more we can talk about, I suppose, in this. Laura Loomer was also in the show. One interesting thing I can say, Laura Loomer at the end of this clip, it's a show, I believe it's from June 1st. Let me play a little bit for you and you can hear the context and then I can explain what the full show actually was discussing. Should Democrats be in jail? No question. When Donald Trump gets elected, should he start locking them up? No question. Should there be lists of Democrats that need to go to jail? 100%. And the reason for that is they've committed crimes. We need to make sure that when Donald Trump wins, we've got an attorney general, a deputy attorney general, a head of the CIA and the FBI. Kash Patel would be fantastic. We can have attorney general. There's some names floating around. And then they can start having their investigators and the feds issuing subpoenas, pulling up evidence, and with real evidence, bring them to judges for warrants. Then these people can spend three years of their lives fighting tooth and nail for the crime against the government for crimes they committed, and we can prove. Yeah. And the reason why we put them on trial is that we can show the whole world we will uncover what you've done. We will make sure everyone knows, and you will be held accountable for it.
Not just jail, they should get the death penalty. We actually used to have the punishment for treason in this country.
And then the show ends. And I'll tell you why. It's because we do not allow calls for violence on this show, allusions to violence. We do not call for the death penalty on this show. That is not allowed. The show is in its full on Rumble, iTunes, Spotify, and all their podcast platforms. It wasn't scrubbed because any of us were concerned about I don't know what they're trying to imply by saying we scrubbed it, but I'll give you the context. This is about Sean Davis of The Federalist, who said he wants to see lists of Democrats that will be arrested when Trump wins. The point I'm making, as you can hear, but they've excluded the context in the before this minute-long clip, is I said, make sure that there's evidence, real evidence. The point was this. Sean Davis said he wanted to see a list of Democrats who Trump was going to arrest. Later on, we even had Steve Bannon say there need to be arrests of 10 high-ranking Democrats who have committed crimes. My point is this. If you are going to say that there are going to be arrests of Democrats, you need to have real evidence and warrants and investigations and prove those crimes. That was the context of this. I oppose the death penalty. Later on in the show, as the show continues, which they could have chosen to show if they wanted to, I say there's not even treason here. It's seditious conspiracy at worst. These are people who are trying to subvert government for personal gain or benefit. They're not aiding enemies of this country. And that's the context of what we were talking about. Now, as I stated, normally I don't talk about our legal issues, but this is... Look, I'll just tell you, like I'm hanging out with family over Labor Day weekend, and all of a sudden my phone's blowing up with family members freaking out. People are freaking out over this, and I'm getting messages and all that stuff. Because to argue that and this is an important distinction, I never said anything about death penalty or treason. I oppose all of those things. And Laura Loomer, again, interesting, never actually called for anyone to arrest or jail anyone, which is interesting. We're two totally different people. We don't work together. She's appeared on the show as a guest. So this claim is that they are accusing me in this clip of saying that Trump should commit what is tantamount to genocide, that should he win, people who won't support him should get executed. And that is absolutely, absolutely insane. And I don't think there's anything worse you could accuse a person of doing.
To me, this is actually a sign of Kamala Harris's campaign desperation. Leaving aside, I understand why you would be outraged. I mean, for them to have shared this about you, for it to have been seen by 11.5 million people.
And that's not including reposts and shares from their account, which we can't track.
But this is, to me, is a calculated attempt that they have clearly made to try and make Project 2025 their focal point of attack on Trump. And so you said this occurred when? In
June 1st.
I believe the show was from June 1st.
So June 1st. So they have had this, I really believe, for months, and they decided as the polls have started to slip and as Kamala Harris's sugar high has begun to diminish, I just look at this purely from a strategy perspective. This, to me, is an attempt to change the storyline from their misguided attacks related to Abbygate and everything that happened at Arlington National Cemetery and try to put this into the Democrat media spin cycle and turn Project 2025 and Trump back into the Hitler of his era, right? This is calculated language by them designed to send that message to all the followers. That's what I take away, not on a particular basis. I don't know about you guys, but that's what strikes me when I see that her official campaign account shared this.
Yeah,
I'm shocked by this.
they did the exact same thing to Charlie Kirk. They said MAGA operative endorses Trump's Project 2025 to give Trump total control over Americans' lives, put the president entirely in charge of the government. And that's not what Charlie Kirk was saying at all. He wasn't, doing that. And Trump also has said that he's not affiliated with Project 2025. I was on the show one night with a Project 2025 person who's no longer with the project, with Heritage Foundation, who said unequivocally that it was not a Trump project, that it was not part of that. They'd been working on this for years. It coincided with Trump's campaign, but it's not the same thing. And it's an effort, too, to paint the entire conservative side and the Republican side as though there's just one voice. And if you think about it, that's what they do with all groups of people. They assume that every group of people is a monolith that doesn't have individuals that can speak for themselves or have their own ideas or ideals or values or thoughts, or plans. And I think that's one of the most dangerous things about the Democratic left today is that they assume people who have similarities that they identify, similar identifiers, should all be shuffled into affinity groups and not be really permitted to have their own thoughts.
Right. I think so much of it is fear mongering, right? I mean, all of this is to make it look like this show is an extremist outlet, and that if you listen to anything from it, if anyone references this show, that they are actually supporting very extreme calls for violence, which is inherently not true. I mean, we've already talked about that. And I think so much of the Democratic left in America relies on fear and compliance. They don't want anyone to check where any clips are coming from. They want people like Charlie Kirk or Tim to be these, shadowy figures who, if you reference them, actually that's a signal that you're, deranged and no one should trust you. And I think that is very, very totalitarian, and people should be afraid of that. But again, this fear of being associated with the wrong people is so inherently bred into American culture right now that it's difficult for the general public to walk away from it.
I don't know how this country survives like this. We've got a bunch of stories, but for the past 10 years there's not been reality in this country. And what I mean to say is that certainly I think there's objective reality. I think things are true, and I think we can prove them beyond a reasonable doubt. I would argue that the corporate press has been lying about the majority of political circumstances. As we can see here, we'll see how the media reports on this one. There's been some reporting on this. But since Trump started running in the first place, there has not been real news. It has been fractured. There have been corporate news outlets that lie and manipulate, and we can definitively prove that they do. So with this, look, it's personal, okay? The Kamala campaign said this about me.
Yeah.
And the lie, it's not Trump spilling food into a fishbowl. It's not Donald Trump praising bad people. I mean, those are shockingly egregious. It's not Donald Trump saying inject bleach, an insane thing to accuse someone of doing. This is it's crazy. I have a family member say the front runner for the largest, the candidate for the largest political party in this country on their official campaign account to 10 plus million people has accused you of calling for the mass execution, the killing extra legally of Democrat voters if they won't back Trump should he win. This is insane. I mean, my family is so pissed off about this. To see that, I'm like, I'm at a loss for words to it. I can certainly speak, but it's crazy to think that we are at this point in this country where the Democratic campaign is doing this. And now, real quick, there's some questions about how does it get so bad? Well, I'll leave it to the lawyers, discovery, whatever ends up happening. But how? I can only assume it was intentional.
What I will tell you as a lawyer, there's no way that some 19-year-old intern got sent a clip and posted it from Kamala Harris's account without it being signed off on to the nth degree. I bet 8 people have to see every tweet before they send it out. It has to be signed off. I guarantee you, again, to me, your point, I think, is a really good one about we live in a world now where you can't trust the vast majority of the media that is shared on a day-to-day basis. And we have a candidate in Kamala Harris, who has been expressly clear that she doesn't believe that Twitter should be allowed basically to exist as it does, and a president and a vice president, she and Biden, who tried to restrict what we could say about COVID. To me, this is a First Amendment election. I understand there's lots of people out there with a lot of opinions on economy, border crime, abortion, whatever you want to talk about. If you don't have the ability to have real debates in this country, there is no freedom. And I think they've recognized that, and I think they're trying to curtail discussions and attack people who have discussions to try to restrict the mass flow of information in this country. And that's why, to me, ultimately, if you believe in the First Amendment, this is an easy decision.
So when it comes to presidential campaigns, you just said you think 8 people had to have signed off on it.
At least. I think that yes. Sorry. But
so you're basically, what I'm wondering is you're saying that as a large presidential campaign they spend what, $1 billion plus
Correct.
in these campaigns? They're having multiple levels of PR scrutiny on everything they're doing. With something like this, it is, in your view, they signed off on that intentionally.
Yes. And I think they have 15 videos like this that they have prepared over the next 2 months on a calculated basis to try to take control of the narrative news cycle. And again, to me, it's significant that you said it in June or whatever the date is.
And it's now.
Yeah, that's interesting.
They have had this video for some time, and I think they have. I bet they have 10 of them.
I swear they had posted it once before. Maybe I'm totally off on that, but I remember. I mean, it was like that night was kind of a big deal because we don't pull the show that often, and whatever. And I thought I had seen it on X before. Maybe it wasn't Kamala's official account.
No, Destiny had posted it.
Maybe it was Destiny, but it's not that this wasn't. This is a clip they either saw live, hi Kamala Harris's campaign, or, they saw it on X previously and clipped it knowing that they wanted to hold on to this. Because I think you're right. I think especially after the DNC dip, she didn't really gain any more momentum for that. There is this honeymoon period that has really closed on her. And now instead of having to give policies, they're trying to stick to Trump is the enemy at all costs. Anyone who talks about Trump positively is actually promoting discord in America, and you must fear them and resist them at all costs. Well, it keeps her from having to be an actual candidate.
The other thing, too, that you have to remember about Kamala's campaign is that they have over 175 digital staffers, right, who are online all the time, specifically looking for ways to attack Trump. So, they've been doing this for a while. This is part of their game plan. It's probably their only game plan. She can't sit for interviews effectively. That interview last week was a disaster. She spoke for, I think, 18 minutes, and the airtime was over 40 minutes on CNN. A lot of it was repeats. I mean, it was ridiculous. She won't take a press conference. She will barely talk to reporters. Every time she does, there's some kind of gaffe. And when she releases any kind of policy proposal, it's either stolen directly from Trump or some kind of weird socialist economic plan that will lead to starvation and famine. So they don't have any plans other than to attack not just Trump, but Trump's voters. Mm-hmm. And I think what's really important about that, too, is it shows you just what she thinks and what her campaign thinks and what this Democratic machine thinks of your average American who's just walking around living their lives, looking for the right person to vote for who they think should leave the country. And they don't have anything to say to those people. They hate those people.
Let's jump to this next story from USA Today. Philadelphia Eagles work to remove bogus political ads purporting to endorse Kamala Harris. This is insane. Okay, look, the previous segment is about the Kamala Harris's accusations or false statements, false declarations about me. But now we are looking at this extreme degree. This is Eagles Nation posting a photo of a billboard found in Philly of the Eagles appearing to endorse Kamala Harris. The team has not made any sort of official announcement, and their voting research website listed on it hasn't been updated since the primary elections. It's Kamala wearing Eagles gear, and it says Kamala, official candidate of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, we don't know who posted these, but I got to tell you, these are on bus stops in Philadelphia. This is either someone at an official capacity with lots of money reached out to a large brokerage firm. We do ads here. We started in 2022 with big billboard spends in Chicago and Times Square. And we've done Google ads since then. It was when we first started doing marketing for the show, believe it or not. And so I've worked with big advertising agencies and brokers. They know exactly who did this. There are speculation. So I'll say the Eagles have denied it, saying this is not us. We do not endorse Kamala Harris. Some people have suggested that the Eagles did endorse her, but following a major backlash, they're now acting like they didn't. I don't know if I would believe that to be true. That's kind of insane. But then the other argument would be someone, look, I'll put it this way. I have an agent. I call this agent who represents a large firm that owns many different, owns real estate all over the country. They know who I am. I have to sign a bunch of crazy paperwork. I have to give them a lot of money. So when we bought these ads in Times Square, 100,000, the first ad was 60 grand. I have to give them the money first, and then in 2 months, they'll put the ad up. They know exactly who I am. They have all of my personal details. These are massive spends. Now, I don't know how many of these were bought, but you usually don't spend a little bit of money when you're doing campaigns like this. When I was discussing bus ads in New York City, not Philadelphia, but New York City, the minimum buy they sent to me was $250,000. There is no way I can imagine this happening, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know what you think.
I think this is potentially, this is my theory, the greatest Dallas Cowboy fan troll job of all time. So I'm thinking, so for people out there who are not diehard sports fans, I am. The NFL kicks off on Thursday. The Philadelphia Eagles are in the NFC East. Their rivals are the New York Giants. New York's a blue state. The Washington Redskins, what do you want to call them now? The Commanders. You know, that is by and
mascot's a
large.
pig.
Yeah. That is by and that is the worst. That is the worst mascot of all time that they now have running around. But that's a DC area, probably left. And then you've got red state Dallas Cowboys. If you were in advertising and you were drinking, let's just toss it out, in Dallas, and you were like, man, screw Kamala Harris. She's the worst. Who's the worst team in our division? It's the Eagles. We should do Kamala endorses the Eagles or the Eagles endorse Kamala ads. And I would put my money on this being some form of Dallas Cowboy, not the official team, but Dallas Cowboy fan pranks.
You actually think so?
And that would be my theory, because I don't think that you could get through this ad without being intentionally trying to ridicule them. I think you would get fired.
The issue is that ad companies, when they take advertisements, they check all the artwork.
Yep.
They go through everything. They make sure that it's not copyrighted. They make sure that you have the rights to it. I tried to get like a T-shirt made, me and my kid, at like, I don't know, Uniqlo or whatever. And he wanted to put some video game logo on it, just hand drawn. He drew it. And they were like, we can't put that on. That's copyrighted. It's not your art. And I used to work in advertising for like 5 minutes before I got fired, but
No,
but like you need to check all the art.
correct. This has got the Eagles logo
It's got
on
the
it.
logo on
Yeah.
it.
Can't do that. I cannot do that. So we tried running an ad in a variety of fashions. This is back when Twitter was refusing to this is back when Twitter was Twitter, before Elon bought it, and when they were running child abuse material. It was a big story. And so I reached out and I said, can we get a billboard that reads about Twitter? And they said, no. And I said, why not? You don't have the rights to that brand, and we won't run an ad that says that word. And I said, okay, well, hold on. What if we rephrase it? And then they were like, here's how you have to restructure it to avoid copyright issues. And I was like, well, then we're not running that at all. It was going to be an activist protest billboard, but they were like copyright and I forgot what they said. For the other thing was obscenity or something like that. So the word was child abuser, starts with a P, but they don't want that on their billboards. Now, granted, this is just the Eagles logo.
Yeah.
But you are not submitting that. So the argument could be that someone got a bunch of these printed up and then broke into those boxes to add. How you have to know how to do that.
There's an artist that they were saying, and I can't remember his name, but who does similar styled art, and he's done it with like Nike, but it's all pro Joe Biden, right? So the idea that this was made by someone who kind of uses commercial logos or whatever in their art isn't, entirely unreasonable. And I would go back to, I assume to get them all up so quickly uniformly, you would have to have some kind of advertising connection. You'd have to know how to get these things placed. But you made me laugh before the show because you were saying that your
great.
team
This is
supports
great.
Kamala Harris is like a college football insult right now.
It is. Like Notre Dame just played. I'm a huge college football fan. Notre Dame just played against Texas A&M down in Texas, and a bunch of the frats had Notre Dame endorses Kamala Harris, basically huge signs that they hung outside of the fraternity houses, sororities too. So the idea that you would endorse Kamala Harris is an insult in many sections of college football right now. And so that's why I'm thinking, again, Dallas Cowboys trolling. Now, you may be well right that the logos, maybe they didn't expect it to work.
Well,
it's an error in judgment that somebody allowed it to be put up. I'm fascinated by this story.
I've seen some statements that there's more than one. This USA Today article says at least one.
Yeah.
If there's one, someone broke into the machine and put it in there somehow. Someone who knew how these things worked got in there. I think this is one of those that rolls. Is that what I don't know.
It's on the like SEPTA, Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation.
What is it? It's the kind that like flips to like different ads on rollers.
Yeah, I think it has those.
If
Some
it's-
of them have those. But it would be hard to get in there.
If it's a roller, I don't know how you break into that. I mean, that's sophisticated.
Here's the
Yeah.
other thing. Remember they had that idiot would-be Josh Shapiro ad where he was going to be VP, and it leaked.
Right.
And then they were like, "Oh, who did
Philadelphia
this? Who would?"
Mayor Sherelle
So
Parker,
I wonder if it could be connected in some way. The same idiot that made that video and somehow got it released for Josh Shapiro, whether simultaneously they were doing Eagle-related ads. They didn't get the right approval, but they have the ability to upload things, and this thing got out there with. I want to know the full story.
Yeah,
Like
I do too.
I really want to know if it's a prank or if somebody's an idiot and they thought, oh, we're in a battleground state. Turnout in Philadelphia might well decide the presidential election.
And Philadelphia is kind of an activist city. I mean, we did see
Totally.
a lot of
It really
activism
is.
there.
Yeah.
So I could totally see someone who had access being like, I got to do this anyways. I really want to. But it makes me laugh because this is coming the same day the New York Times is running this article, left-wing misinformation is having a moment. Now, if you read the article at the end, they basically blame Trump. They're like, he's
They
responsible
blame
for all bad
Trump for
things.
everything.
Yeah.
But
But it is interesting
for
because-
their wanting to destroy the Constitution.
But it's interesting because they are acknowledging that there have been several major missteps by the Harris campaign that are misinformation, that they are presenting these false informations. Again, you know, what happened over the weekend to Tim. Like there is a mistrust in the Harris campaign where people don't believe. I mean, the fact that people are immediately like, I don't think the Eagles endorsed her tells
Yeah.
you that like between her and Walz, you know, his stolen valor and his fake IVF, people don't look at the two of them and think this is an honest ticket. They will really tell us the truth.
By the way, the other people that could be involved here, Pittsburgh Steeler fans.
You're coming up with your whole new conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean, there is a huge Steeler versus the Eagles element of Pennsylvania, and Pittsburgh is much more of a 50-50, you know, surrounding. I would bet most Steelers fans are going to vote Trump, whereas I would bet maybe most Eagles fans are going to vote Kamala. That's
The
just a
ones that
rough
vote.
approximation.
The ones
yeah.
that vote, yeah.
And that might not even be accurate, by the way.
Now all these NFL teams have to issue a statement being like, we were not involved.
The thing too is, you know, how often does a sports team endorse a candidate?
Yeah, is that
Should never do it.
Does that
I've never
happen
heard of
very
that.
why do
often?
news organizations do it?
Well, the
It's-
New York Times does it because they think they're the rulers of the universe.
Yeah.
That's accurate.
And I think other editorial boards
I mean, they
do it
do.
for the same reason. They feel as
Right.
though they are
I mean,
trying to
we
be
don't
ahead
do
of the
it,
news.
you know.
To
we
Libby's
don't do
point, I mean, it wasn't the New York Times didn't just tell Joe Biden that he had to drop out once.
No, they
They
kept
did it,
saying
and then they were like,
they got
"Hey, we
George
really mean
Clooney to
it."
do
Yeah,
it,
and then we
you
got George
know?
Clooney to write it.
Yeah.
But you're a sports guy. Has this ever happened before where a sports team has been like, we
Well,
want to throw our hat in the ring politically?
I like to think that Outkick is starting to kind of bring normalcy back to sports because the craziest thing that's ever happened in sports politically. Do you remember the NBA put Black Lives Matter on the basketball court?
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
They took the players' names off the back
Yeah.
and replaced them with almost exclusively left-wing political slogans. Like, that freaking
Well,
happened.
and the thing too was, I remember that because the NBA players were allowed to pick their left-wing political
That's
slogan,
right.
but they weren't allowed to pick like
Their name.
"All Lives Matter" or
couldn't do it.
"Save Unborn Babies"
Yes.
or
No.
anything like that. You
No,
know, or
totally.
"Close the border." They weren't allowed to
no, of
pick
course
like
not.
slogans that they might have actually believed in, and anyone who didn't kneel down
Yes.
was, you know, shunned and called white supremacist and all of the horrible things.
And remember, the craziest one of all was the WNBA players came out in Jacob Blake T-shirts.
Oh, that was crazy.
Right, and he
tried
was an
to murder
abuser,
a black
right?
woman,
Yeah.
and she called the police
Well,
to protect him.
He was trying to rape her.
Yeah.
She called.
They were estranged. She had a restraining order.
That's right, and he
And
showed
then
up.
You had the
showed up
football
at the
player
house.
with the name on his helmet.
Drew Brees.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Drew Brees put because Drew Brees said. Remember, Drew Brees got ripped for saying that the reason he stood for the anthem was because his grandfathers fought Nazis in World War II, and then they started chanting F Drew Brees.
Wow.
And so he showed up with Jacob Blake's name on his helmet. And
Which is the
Jacob
guy
Blake,
who ended up paralyzed when he was trying to kidnap his children.
because he had a knife
Yeah.
and refused to put it down and was trying to show up and attack the mother of his children.
Yeah, I think he had assaulted her before. She got a restraining order.
That's right.
It was a long time ago. And then he reaches and grabs a knife in his car, and the cop shoots him.
After trying to tase him and stop him for
Right.
some time before, he went and withdrew a weapon from his car.
Let's jump to this in the Telegraph. Watch. Kamala Harris feigns accent in speech to blue-collar workers. Critics say Vice President speaks with a different dialect as she vows to support union workers in battleground state of Michigan. What I love about the telegraph.co.uk, for those that don't know, is it's a rather neutral headline. Feigns accent is in quotes, and they say critics say. I can respect that. Here you go. We got some.
You better thank a union You
What?
better thank a union member for vacation time.
What is that?
Thank unions for sick leave. Thank unions for paid family leave. Thank unions for your vacation time.
What is that? Wow. When you look at how the media reports it here, you could Google just sends you this. Obviously, Fox News says Kamala Harris goes viral with a new accent at Detroit rally, but Newsweek says MAGA accuses Harris of changing her accent. Accuses? She's doing it.
Yeah,
I mean,
she's doing it. You
And
should
then
listen.
New Republic MAGA melts down over Kamala Harris's accent for idiotic reasons. Dude, come on. What was that? What is this?
Detroit and Pittsburgh, for those who don't know, 5 hours apart.
Yeah.
We're not even talking about days apart. We're talking about literally the same day. Look, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. And they're saying that's a Southern accent. I mean, it's an awful Southern accent. No one else, if I went to Massachusetts to try to appeal to people and started talking like a Kennedy, everybody would ridicule me. And then I went to, back home to Nashville and said the exact same speech in a totally different accent. Southerners are used to this. People think that we are stupid if we live in the South. And you guys are all nodding. You're like, yeah, we're borderline South right now. And they think that they will have more appeal to us if they pretend to be like us, even when we know they aren't. Hillary Clinton did this with the ridiculous aspects. Kamala's the fakest person, I think, to ever run for president.
But she's in Michigan with this clip. I mean,
that's why I don't really understand it.
Instead of trying to appear like whatever, I think she's faking the Southern accent to seem welcoming, to seem more friendly. The way that people, stereotype Southern ladies by saying "bless your heart," but actually that's not.
I think she just wants to seem more black.
Well, let's apply what you said there, Hannah Claire. That Kamala Harris tries to sound a way to
alter people's perception of her,
so that they feel like she's like them.
Mm-hmm. I think it's trying to be disarming or charming.
Yeah, here's a story from Yale Insights. White liberals present themselves as less competent in interactions with African Americans. So if the argument is that people like Kamala are going to meet a bunch of Southerners and then try and put on a Southern drawl, or they're going to meet people in the city and they're going to try and speak like a street dialect of sorts, white liberals, according to Yale, act like they're stupid. What does that mean about how they perceive black people?
They do think black people are stupid, and we've seen this for years. There was a study done that showed that white elitist liberals speak down to their black counterparts, whether they have the same level of degrees and obviously, similar intelligence and all of that. White liberals speak down to black people, and that's very clear. That's been.
Did you guys see the video?
Batya Ungar-Sargon talks about that, and that was really that study was really the beginning of her, moving away from the organized left.
Did you guys see the video that went viral recently of liberal white people being asked about requiring ID to vote?
Well, that's actually the Ami Horowitz one. That's a classic video, and it's actually several years old, but it is always worth
keeps
bringing
cycling back through, and all the white people basically think black people are too dumb and not
right. Kamala Harris even thinks that. She said that there shouldn't be voter ID because you need to get forms photocopied, and you might live in a place where you don't have access to photocopying
I forgot about
machines,
that.
which is like so clearly she's never been to any real rural places, which, me personally, neither had I, and then I moved to one, and it's like it's not difficult to get something photocopied or anything. It's not difficult to anything.
I think what it represents is that, again, Kamala is super inauthentic, but also she's incredibly lacking in confidence.
That's a true
And so
thing.
everything that she does is desperately trying to get people to like her. And that is why I think these accents happen. I think she's trying to make people like her, and it comes across so fake that I think it actually blows up in her face and makes people less likely to like her.
I do too. I mean, if you go back and play that clip where they're contrasting Pittsburgh, where she's not using an accent, and then Michigan, again, it's not the South. It's not like she's going to Texas and trying to blend in there. I think she's using the Southern accent to seem like she has more of a personality and to seem like she has some kind of charm, which she doesn't. We know that she's not successful. She's more animated when she's in Detroit. When you go to the Pittsburgh one, she looks much more scared.
leave. You better thank a union member for paid leave. You better thank a union member for vacation time.
It's all hands. She's leaning. And some of this is a stereotype of like a Southern gospel
Thank
black
unions
woman.
for sick leave. Thank unions.
Her
for
gestures are
paid
much
family
smaller.
leave.
She looks more nervous.
Thank unions for your vacation
She's not
time.
moving and looking around as much. Like her body language is different when she doesn't have this fake accent. I think she really is trying to ascertain her personality.
Here's the other funny thing, guys. The first clip went viral, and they might have been like, hey, people made fun of how you talked. Maybe dial it back. And then she dialed it back, and it actually made things worse. Because then you put them side by side. And this is why so many of your advisors are worthless.
Yeah.
Because this is, if you allow people to get in your head, eventually, and I'm sure this is what's happened to Kamala, you don't even know what's real. You can't act normal anymore.
Could you imagine if she kept that dialect? If the advisors went to her and said, Kamala, look, you used the dialect. You can't drop it now. You will get accused of being inauthentic. From this point forward, that's how you talk. She's on the debate stage with Trump next week, and she's talking like this to Donald Trump. I'm for, and he's going to be like, Kamala, why are you talking that way? That's weird. What are you doing?
What do you? If he calls her weird,
Yeah,
that would be a
what
very
is this?
viral moment. But the thing too, it's like what you were saying about people telling her to dial it back or whatever. She has so many handlers. There's so many people telling her what to do and how to behave and what to think and what to say. I mean, the only thing she has control over are those sneakers, she's never been a genuine person in front of the American people. Maybe she was genuine in 2020 when she touted all those left-wing positions that she's now backtracking on, even though she actually still believes in them. But I don't know. I don't know what they think. I don't know what her handlers think people would be voting for other than her identity and the, Democrat Party machine, voting for the people who will be staffed. These unelected bureaucrat types.
You've been writing online for a while, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever read the comments to what people say about your article?
No,
Why not?
because I don't really have that kind of time.
Because they're not real.
I think it's because they're not real. I also think if
Who has
you
said
allow
that?
people you don't know to critique your work and you take it seriously, sometimes it gets in your head and it will impact the way
for
that
sure.
you perform.
Yeah, I mean, this is why in theater, people always say, don't read the reviews after
Correct.
opening night. And when I used to do theater and we'd get reviewed, which didn't always happen, but sometimes happened, I would just be like, and this was back, when there were newspapers, I'd be like, no newspapers backstage. Like, we're not looking at we're just going to do the show. You just got to do your show.
My top advice for people who do live radio, because I came out of sports talk radio, don't ever pay attention now to what people say while you're live on the air. Same thing now. I mean, I'm sure there's comments rolling in YouTube like all the time. But if you worry, this is a great line from.
Oh, you don't want to know what this is.
I'm sure they're lighting me up right now.
They're posting eggplant emojis and then your name.
That seems positive.
Is that good or
I'm not
bad?
sure.
Is that good or bad? Charles Barkley had a great line, and he said, and I give credit to him, if you worry about the opinions of people who don't like you, then eventually the people who do like you won't like you either.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And now everybody hates Kamala.
In a similar vein, too, there was something interesting that I think it was Zuby who brought this up. He said a lot of people, I'm paraphrasing because I don't know the exact quote, but a lot of people think that once you get rich, you're untethered, you can say whatever you want. It's actually the opposite. There are people who make $60K a year who are scared to lose their jobs, so they fall in line, they refuse to speak out. These big Hollywood celebrities who make millions of dollars are even more scared to speak out because a fall from grace is much more embarrassing than just getting fired. And so the more money they make, the more likely they are to march with the machine.
Golden handcuffs.
Yeah.
That's
Golden
like
handcuffs are real.
That's like what Kanye West was saying at one point. The more fame he got, the more people were trying to tell him what to do all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the people who piss me off. It's not the people who make $60K a year. I understand. You got to pay your mortgage. You got to help your kids get through school, all those things. If you have $20 million or more, you live the rest of your life an amazing life. The people that really piss me off are the ones who are rich and are cowards.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, too, because it's true. Like, if you're working some job and there's human resources and they're going to fire you if you say men aren't women, then, that's a lot harder.
Same thing with COVID shots, right? Like, I understand why people had to
Look
go.
what happened when JK Rowling stood up for the gender critical women and said, men aren't women, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm just going to say it outright. Well, the first time she said it, her publicist was like, no, she's just old. She didn't really say that.
She's out of touch.
She was wrong. And no. And then, it took her, that was in June of whatever year it was. And then it took her till December when she put up the mega viral post and everyone got very mad. But you know what else happened was thousands and thousands of women and parents took the opportunity to speak their mind as well.
Yeah.
And so when you
Courage
have
is
someone
contagious.
who is powerful and has a lot of money and has a big platform and stands up and says, like you do this, Tim, and then people have courage to say what they believe too. All it really takes is one person.
And JK Rowling's a good example because she did then follow up with she followed up financially. She invested in that women's clinic for women who are victims of rape and assault to go specifically to only be with female staff members. And then she doubled down and said, no, you can't allow trans identifying people. They have the National Health Service. There are other research done. This is for women.
No fellas.
I mean, it's what
the rape crisis
it was
center.
almost as if speaking out. I know it's a crazy concept, but it's almost as if speaking out really changed the way she was spending because she was, donated all kinds of super woke causes before. But I think some of this is similar to why people like Donald Trump, right? Like he has the money to which he could say, I'm going to live my life however I want to, and he chooses to do something that's pro-America. With Kamala Harris, I mean, she is, fundamentally wealthier than most Americans, and she is still looking to everyone around her to say, what can I do for validation and to gain power? There is weakness in that position.
I would
think people
also
can see it.
point out JK Rowling's really good at what she does, and that talent ultimately allows you the freedom to do a lot. They're making new Harry Potter shows all of a sudden at Warner Brothers. They're expanding the theme park there because she's a kick-ass talent.
And I got to address this meme that's been going around forever. And it's this meme that claims, it says that in the Harry Potter universe, there's a spell that it's silent, it's secret, you can just kill anybody, and people aren't just killing each other all the time. And for those that aren't familiar with Harry Potter, there is the killing curse, which is a component of the story where you can point your wand, say words, and the person dies.
Avada Kedavra.
Avada Kedavra. And people...
That is a super nerd. I knew it too. I'm glad that you...
But here's the interesting thing. JK Rowling actually did a really great job in writing this. The one thing I think is interesting is that she's basically written books about children who have the equivalent of guns or worse, and they're running around schools. But anyway, I digress. I'm seeing all these people attack JK Rowling now because of the trans issue, acting like all of a sudden everything she did was wrong. And in this meme, they're saying, the reason this makes no sense is because she's a terrible writer. She's never been good. Nobody likes her. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. People have guns all over the place. People in West Virginia are armed to the teeth. Nobody's just walking around shooting each other. Whether you can point a wand or a gun at somebody, people don't just kill each other. But I believe the criticism in the memes largely come out of she has turned on the woke left, and they have turned on her, and now Harry Potter must be bad.
Meanwhile, you also have trans advocates who say things like, JK Rowling gave us a place to feel like being freaky was normal and we could just be ourselves. And now we hate her so much, so we're going to divorce JK Rowling from the work she created. And they've been trying to, trying to put out versions of her books that don't have her in it, trying to keep her out of properties in that franchise, even though it's 100% hers.
Didn't they keep her out of the reunion? There's like a big thing.
There was an HBO reunion, and they referenced old interviews with her, but she was not in that.
But I would say
that made me not watch it. Like, I don't give a rat's whatever. I don't know.
Booty.
I can't not curse properly. But I don't care what Daniel Radcliffe has to say, or what's her name, Hermione Granger,
Emma Watson.
Emma Watson, who turned out to be such a little brat. Like, she's terrible.
I think that ultimately what's happening though is her talent is so substantial that Warner Brothers has now come back, paid her hundreds of millions of dollars more, and they're saying, please give us more of your content.
Talent is rare.
Yeah.
Talent is rare.
And I give
world
her credit
creation.
And so is bravery,
she does
sadly.
Unbelievable world creation.
Yes.
Like, that was the one thing when I started reading those books with my kid and I started reading it, I was like, the most brilliant thing in those books is the world.
You
And
read
my
the
son
books
even
before
said,
your kids read them or no?
Oh yeah, well he was little, and we saw them at a book sale for $1 each at the book sale at the library near my grandma's house, and so we bought them all. And I started reading them with him when he was like 5 or something, and then I just stayed up all night reading.
I read them all when I was in law school.
Yeah, they're
because
really
I
good.
wanted something.
I was in grade school.
I
started
wanted
reading the books.
I wanted something that just took me away from the serious things in my life, and so
Well,
I
the
would
world
read them all.
creation is unbelievable.
It's phenomenal. I love her.
I read it after grad school.
I read the books as they came out.
That's very cool.
I remember being a teenager, and I think the 7th book came out when I turned 21, or like shortly after I was 21. And I had friends who were like, wow, when the final book is written, we're going to be 20. And I was like, I don't know, 14 or 15 or something.
It seemed like
We
a
were
long
like, wow.
way away.
I didn't
Those
have
books
kids
were
yet.
amazing.
I remember going to get the books when they came out, feeling a little weird.
Well, I bought
because there was a
them-
kid
I like
party.
pretending you're giving them to your nephews.
I know. Now I've got kids.
Let's jump back to the news. We've got this story from Interactive Polls, the latest from Nate Silver, projecting Donald Trump with a 56.7% chance of winning, with swing states swinging to Trump. Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, and Nevada, with only Michigan and Wisconsin going to Kamala Harris. Polymarket now has Trump at 51%. Could this be why we are seeing the Harris campaign now come out with more egregious and misleading statements?
Well, did you see at the rally that she had with Biden in Pennsylvania over the weekend, she said something to the effect of, we know this race is going to be very competitive. We can't pay attention to polls right now. Her campaign at one point was bragging about all these headlines that were saying she was winning in these swing states and she was ahead. And now she's telling her supporters like, oh, well, we don't know what the polls are going to say, like just sort of shifting away from them because it's not the headlines that she wants anymore.
I think what's happening here is the voters in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin are going to decide this race. And a lot of those voters are old white guys. And Joe Biden was able to convince those old white guys that he was unthreatening and that he would be a very normal president. That wasn't true, but he was able to convince them. Kamala's not doing that. And I think what Nate Silver's prediction reflects is there's starting to be a little bit of panic setting in because those old white guys are looking at Kamala and they're like, this ain't Scranton Joe. This is not 80-year-old Joe Biden who's just the same age as Trump, but maybe a little bit less active on Twitter. Things will get back to normal. This is Kamala Harris, who doesn't have kids of her own, who is 60 years old herself, kind of weird, not very normal, frankly. And I think the data's I think they're starting to panic. I think that's why they put out the clip about you. I think that's why they got 10 or 15 other clips already saved that they're going to put out to try to build on this threat of Trump as Hitler.
You don't think
I
Tim
think that's
Walz
going in.
is helping the white men in the Midwest believe in Kamala Harris?
You know what the problem is with
I don't
Tim
think
Walz?
that's working well.
I don't think so either. He's so clearly milquetoast. He's such a little
white guilt
such a
walls.
little puffy man that doesn't seem to have any spine at all. Like you try and imagine him being in the military at all is just like laughable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's why they tried to play up this coach thing. I mean, maybe you could talk about this with the impact on sports in American psychology, but they had to immediately shift away from the veteran perspective because it was just not working for obvious reasons. And so they're saying Coach Walz, the only person I know in government who uses that nickname is Tommy Tuberville out of Alabama, who actually is pretty principled and, seems like he projects himself pretty masculine. Tim Walz does not. Tim Walz seems like just the annoying suburban, president of the HOA who's policing your lawn and not being nice to anyone in the neighborhood.
Well, his brother doesn't like him.
I saw that,
was
but
crazy.
when he came out and spoke, what you just hit on is so important. He's the governor of Minnesota. Did you see the placards that they were holding said Coach Walz?
Yeah.
They didn't call him Governor Walz.
Well, they'd never refer to Kamala Harris as vice president.
Right.
They only talked
weird.
about
Because
her
they're
as
trying
vice
to
president when
run
they were
as
dragging
if
her.
she's new.
They're like, she's this outsider. She's a California prosecutor. They don't even talk about her time in the Senate because she didn't get anything done. She was completely ineffectual. She was ultra liberal, and she was, a meaningless entity there.
He was 25 years ago an assistant coach. He wasn't even the head coach.
They call him Coach Walz.
Yeah.
He's not even like currently coaching
It was
his
a
kids' team.
quarter century ago, and they're standing there with placards for Coach Walz. I think it's a clear attempt to try to appeal to what I call the Big Ten voters. And I don't think that she's going to connect with them at all. And I think that data's starting to reflect that she is not. and the panic is going to get more intense. And if Trump can just stay the course, I think that she's going to self-destruct.
I wonder if, because people talk about the DNC bump didn't emerge or whatever, but also Donald Trump's been doing a lot of these podcasts.
I think that's so great.
I think that may be boosting him. He's, let me tell you guys a secret. It's not really a secret, but, we work with some advertisers periodically, and we often hear shock at how well ads perform when they sponsor this show. They say, like, we spend twice as much advertising on other platforms or, television, radio, billboard. But IRL, man, he's like, man, you guys as fans, look at what Matt Gaetz says about the show. Not even from an advertising perspective, just he meets people all the time who are big fans.
They run up to him, yeah.
But here's the reality. It's because this is just a show, whereas the other shows are bots and fake numbers puffed up so they can sell ads. We're membership driven. I'm not relying on selling ad spots, so I don't need to puff the numbers up and say, we get 10 million views. I don't need to do that. Because then if you do, you go to an advertiser and you say, 10 million views, is what we're going to get you, and you're going to give us X amount of dollars, and then they sell, 10 widgets or whatever. They sponsor Timcast, and we're like, here's our viewership. And they're like, wow, we sold way more than we normally do for this rate. That's what I see with Kamala Harris. That's what I see with Donald Trump doing these podcasts. Trump starts going on these podcasts. This is where the audience actually is, where the key demo actually is. And these television programs, these cable TV news shows have passive viewers who are either in hotel lobbies or airports, or they're at home and they're not really paying attention, and you do not connect the same. Trump starts doing these podcasts with all these different people. People are starting to hear him. And now they're going, oh.
Yeah, he's going to where the people are. And
Right.
I think that's so important. It's also reflective of the campaign that he's really been trying to run, repeatedly since 2016. I can't believe that this is the third, maybe basically fourth, don't pick Trump campaign that the DNC has launched. If they were smart, and really what I'm saying is if Kamala Harris had any charisma or personality, she would go on the equivalent to these
would
kind of
go
podcasts.
on
She
all
would go
these
and call her
shows.
daddy, that feminist girl boss, whatever podcast. Like, she would go to these places that are going to lob her 100 softball questions, and people are going to say, but
She'd
she's
go on
cool and
all
trendy.
the little NPR shows.
But she
She'd
can't do
all
it.
of these.
She should come on
can't do
Timcast IRL.
Yeah, she should come on Timcast
She
IRL.
should. That would be pretty great.
But she won't, and it's because she can't. I mean, unless she
she
can bring her
doesn't go
best
on
buddy Tim
anything.
Walz with her, right?
She doesn't do anything.
I think it also is reflective of if you spend 45 minutes or an hour with somebody, it's hard to caricature them.
Well, I'll tell you, for a show like this, the reason why it's so hard to get Democrats is because we don't let people just say it. Like, let me give you an example, a better way to describe this. When Dana Bash was like, you said you carried a weapon of war in war. And he goes, well, my grammar's not so good. My wife says that. But, it's not that. They're going to go after my kids. And on this show, I'd be like, yeah, dude, but you said you were in war. I mean, own it. Just say you're sorry or whatever. We can move on. But you can't just gloss over it and not answer the question. You come on a show like this, or any other podcast for that matter, they're not going to let you get away with that.
I think that's right.
That was a great trend. I thought that Vivek Ramaswamy started in when he was running during the primaries and stuff. He would go on any show that asked him on.
Yeah.
I think
And I thought
JD's
that
doing
was
that.
so great. Yeah, JD's doing that, and also
Oh, we got to get JD on the show.
you see Trump. That's awesome. But you see Trump going on so many podcasts, and he's going out to where the voters are.
I saw the Fox News stat. Trump and JD did 34 national shows between the two of them in August.
I think
Walz
Harris.
and
that's what it
Harris
takes.
did one.
I was going to
That's
say, I
what it
think
takes
Harris
to
has
run.
done fewer interviews than Joe Biden has, and he is
a great point.
notoriously withdrawn from the media. I mean, are you telling me that the guy who we think has dementia is better able to talk to the press than you are, and you want to be the president?
You know this JD, this Vance Weird campaign they're doing?
Yeah.
I actually think it works to a certain degree because JD Vance is so normal. And I do mean that. He is not, if he was wearing a cowboy hat and would go on shows and just bombastically yell and bang the table and bang a cowbell whenever he was making a point, you could call him all sorts of things and then he'd yell over you. Donald Trump talks over people famously, excuse me, and then he jumps in. He doesn't let you get away with it. JD Vance is too mild-mannered and normal. So when they make these things about him, he's just like, oh, that's ridiculous. And it's not a strong enough reaction.
I also think they are devious and diabolical, and most people don't know JD Vance.
Exactly.
So you can characterize him however you would like. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was looking at favorables today. Tim Walz has like 20 points higher favorability right now than J.D. Vance. Tim Walz is weird. I mean, you want to talk about weird. I mean, the guy lied about his DUI. The guy's claiming to be a coach 25 years after he did it.
Assistant coach.
I'm trying to be, yes, but still bragging about it.
But you were saying before he was never actually a coach.
Never actually a head coach.
Yeah.
I mean, for most people who are in sports, the guy who is the assistant coach doesn't brag about winning the state championship.
Right.
I mean, Bill Belichick won 6 Super Bowls. Nobody knows all the assistants and how many Super Bowls they won. Like, you are the head coach. You get credit for the wins or the losses. The assistant coaches don't. And so, but they have been so good about characterizing Tim Walz as the normal football guy because they have so many more media assets. Walz hasn't even done interviews.
But the other thing too is they really play up Waltz being the stupid white guy.
Yeah.
Which I don't think really plays that well with voters who are, so many young white men are flocking to Trump. They don't want to be the stupid white guy. They don't eat, tuna fish and mayonnaise tacos. They don't do any of this stuff.
Who does that?
Yeah, I've never heard of anybody
literally
doing
no one
that.
does that. Remember that little scripted episode
Yeah,
they did?
I know.
I mean, and
What is
also
it like mayonnaise and tuna fish?
Yeah,
what? What?
It also tells you
white
what
man
Kamala
tacos.
Harris thinks
That's
of
called a
white
wrap.
men.
yeah,
You take a tortilla and you put tuna on it. You call it a tuna wrap.
right. It's like a little snack, maybe. I don't know. My kid eats
Little
tuna.
romaine.
But they also
celery
to
in
your
But you
point.
also but Tim Waltz several years ago won a recipe contest
Yes.
with a spicy dish. It was chock full of cayenne pepper. So on top of everything else, they are clearly trying to play him up as the stupid white guy, and that's probably also a lie. He eats cayenne pepper.
He's a master chef.
Well,
at home.
also
Well,
it's
I think it had tater tots in it or whatever. But
it was a taco hot dish
Yeah.
with various spices, garlic, onion, peppers, cayenne, whatever.
But rather than being like, I am a
fine.
proud Midwesterner and we love casseroles, he instead was like, I am your dumb white sidekick, which is essentially Obama Biden 2.0. That he was this cool guy from the city and, he was going to be our first,
Except
black
that at least
president.
Biden had a
But
career
then-
going back to the 70s.
Yeah, except in this case, she has no charm, and at least Obama had some charisma, and he is untrustworthy, and people, even Democrats, know that. So
the camo
And
hat.
we're also
camo
all
hat
really
to me.
tired of the stupid white guy trope. Like
The
we don't
camo
want
hat
that
is
anymore.
perfect example of that.
Yeah, that's for sure.
We're
And
gonna
Ella
put-
Emhoff wearing it.
That's what I'm saying. It's when you go to Brooklyn and somebody in Brooklyn is like, I love Bud Light. I drink Bud Light all the time. They're ironically drinking
they
a Bud Light.
ironically
That was-
drink the
well, now they
PBR
might
as
drink.
well.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Even the
So
camo hat
I'm going to
thing
wear
was- the
camo
camo
and
hat
hide
thing
out on
was-
the subway.
The camo hat thing is stolen from Chappell Rowan, the pop singer. Like,
Yes.
she tweeted, like, is this a joke? Because that's her merch. That's how uncreative and brainless this campaign is. They're relying on pop culture figures to make these two irrelevant, not personable people seem like they are worth your time and energy.
And her wearing the hat actually is not endearing to Southerners, but to hipster Brooklynites.
Correct.
That's
Who
what
they
they
don't
will.
need to endear
They're-
themselves to.
Southerners are used to seeing people in camo, so
so-
we don't think, oh my goodness, I like this person because they're wearing camo. Of course not. You can like them or not like
The
them.
trope would be a guy in a flannel shirt with rolled up sleeves and a mullet and like a trucker hat. And you'd be like, where do you think that person lives? And everyone's going to be like, the South. No, that's Brooklyn. In the South, they're probably wearing like jeans and a t-shirt.
I'll come
They call
back
it
to this.
Bushwick. Yeah.
Bushwick.
It only goes one way. No one in the South tries to pretend they're from New York. Right? Like no politician, for instance, if you, I don't know, who's a successful Southern politician right now, like Ted Cruz doesn't go to New York City and try to pretend that he's from New York City because it would look ridiculous.
If anything, is to wear a bolo tie.
Yet people from New York try to pretend that they're from Texas all the time, and it's considered
I gotta
normal.
say, like, as someone who lived in New York for like 20 something years, I hate that.
Yeah.
Like, whenever I would see New Yorkers walking around in cowboy boots, I'd just be like, just put on some proper shoes. You look ridiculous. And now there's this whole trend in New York of like cowboy country stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the Beyonce thing. And
Well, they
it's
tried to
ludicrous.
claim that Beyonce, the New York Times, I remember seeing the headline, and I couldn't believe I meant to take a picture of it. It's like, Beyonce makes cowboys popular. And I'm like, cowboys have been
are
pretty
already-
popular for a long time. Beyonce
it
wearing
was
a
already
cowboy
trendy,
hat.
and that's why she wrote a Western album. Like her company
Right.
looked around and was like, "We got to keep you relevant. Write a Western country album."
We saw this with Outkick because Outkick came out of the SEC and the Big Ten, the middle part of the country, and then New York and LA became aware that we existed, and it got popular there too. But it's kind of like the television show Yellowstone. Yellowstone took off in the middle part of the country, and then everybody suddenly in New York and LA, everybody in New York and LA suddenly realized that it was popular. But I think part of that is the insecurity with New York and LA not realizing that they're not the center of everything that's ever occurred, and not wanting to acknowledge that anything in the middle part of the country could actually be great. I live in Nashville. I don't want to live in New York or LA.
They literally call them flyover states.
And it is like that old New Yorker cover. Do you remember that? And it's like the New Yorker's view of the world.
Yes.
It's like New York, Queens, New Jersey.
That perfect example of that. Do you guys remember when the power went out in New York?
Which
like 20 years ago.
You mean in 2002?
And the whole media was like, "Oh my goodness, the power's out."
I was there. I remember exactly.
Oh, of course
where
you
I
do,
was
because
when
you're
that
in New
happened.
York at that time. But the rest of us were sitting around in the country, and it was as if New York had fallen off the planet. When
Here's a funny one.
There's that. Yes.
1976,
Yeah.
New York view, and it's 10th Avenue, 9th Avenue, Hudson River, and then just barren desert, and then Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, that seems exactly
Jersey
right.
and beyond doesn't exist.
But I mean, New Yorkers are proud of this. They're proud of who they are, and they're proud of their city, and like, God bless them. But yeah, the 14th Street substation blew up. There was a little explosion.
Oh, I remember. I mean, it was. I think Detroit also got a little bit. Detroit power went out, but yeah, the world had come to a close. Aliens had landed.
That was a
I think
great
that there
weekend,
was a
I gotta
time
say.
in,
Great weekend.
I think there was a time in American media, though, where New York really did seem like this wonderful place. Like, so many movies are set in New York. People will flock there at Christmas for things. But that's like some place Americans like to visit. They don't want to be there. And I think that's reflective of the politicians, right? They all posture as if they have rural, small town ties, because ultimately that's where most Americans live and want to stay. This idea that New York would be the Mecca for all things is sort of delusional.
Yeah.
Well, it'll come back.
Okay, New Yorker. Spoken like a New Yorker. I had this one family friend. She's a generational, like, grandparents, great-grandparents. Everyone was in New York. And she looked at me one time and she was like, well, New York is the center of the universe. And she's
not wrong.
Yeah.
let's jump to the story from the New York Post. Biden whines, Secret Service doesn't let me engage with crowds. I saw this, and it's funny because I can't remember who tweeted it, but they were like, isn't it funny that as soon as Joe Biden drops out of the 2024 race, he just stopped pretending to be president?
Yeah,
He's
he's
on
been on the
vacation
beach
and-
for like weeks and weeks.
And he's not doing anything.
No,
He's
and
just
you
like, I'm
even
out.
had Kamala Harris going out there being like, me and Joe working around the clock and trying to get these hostages freed. Meanwhile, the hostages are getting murdered. Joe Biden's on a beach, and she's, like...
They had
barely
him
doing anything.
speak before her at this rally in Pennsylvania. That's how irrelevant he is now. He is the sitting president, and they don't give him any sort of dignity. They're just like, please stay over there.
Yeah.
Occasionally come out with some sort of stern finger shaking at Netanyahu, and then go back, leave, go away.
How about his approval ratings have gone up, and he hasn't worked for a month? I mean, do you see that? His approval ratings have gone up like
People feel
9
bad for him.
points.
These are like sympathy approval ratings.
I can't
They're
believe
not real
it.
approval ratings.
No, I think that makes sense. His approval rating goes up. It has. It's gone up because they're like, thank heavens Joe Biden is not doing. He's
not going to run
Like,
again.
oh,
And also,
he's
he's
a
not
kind
the
little
gas.
He's not
man.
working anymore.
There haven't been every time he spoke, even when he spoke at this most recent rally, he got all stumbly and everything else. When he doesn't speak, people forget that he's incompetent at being able to be president, and they like him more.
Infirm.
Yes.
Well, he's just a kindly old man. That's why he couldn't be held accountable for absconding with classified documents that he wasn't entitled to at the end of his vice presidential term.
I mean, to have an actual independent counsel say the president of the United States' brain doesn't work well enough for him to be charged with a crime.
But you guys
is
have to keep him as your
really
president.
But charge Trump, even though
really
there's the Presidential
extraordinary.
Records Act, and he gets to decide what's classified and what's not at the end of his term, and what belongs to him and what doesn't.
The whole time.
What do you think
Yeah.
Joe Biden's legacy is going to be? Because that's what I feel like his team is now pivoting into. They're
That's
just
all they
trying
care
to,
about.
They're just trying to wrap it up so that at the end people are like, it wasn't that bad.
I think it's going to be that he was an accidental president like Jimmy Carter was. And COVID, this is my theory, COVID got him into office like Watergate got Jimmy Carter into office.
Interesting.
And people will look back at it and say it. Because if COVID doesn't happen, I think Trump
Trump
would
wants
have
you.
smoked him in 2020.
But let's just hope that's true, and the legacy of Biden is more like Carter and not Buchanan.
Well, yeah, good Lord. I hope that's a good historical reference for a Civil War nerd like me. But I think, given where we are, the state, breaking up West Virginia and Virginia and everything else, but I think you look at, I think for Biden, Kamala's win would change his legacy tremendously, because then he gave up power and passed to the next generation.
Oh, strong black woman, the whole thing.
If she loses to Trump, then it's the Jimmy Carter, which is what I think is going to happen. But if he wins, he's like the bridge to the next generation.
They're going to make him
leaders.
a civil rights icon, and they're going to say he was the old white male who gave up power for a younger woman of color, signifying, all of these things.
I asked you guys, I'm curious, what happens if Kamala loses? Trump's going to be 80. Like, Trump is elderly, right? So, I mean, Trump's legacy is going to be substantial no matter what. Where does Kamala go if she loses this race?
Oh, she could get, university president position, something like that.
But, I mean, that's a tremendous drop-off, right? Because I don't know that she has a skill set that would suggest that she could do anything very well.
Well, that's why she needs to do a figurehead position.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of these figurehead university presidents. We see they're just swapping them in and out at like Columbia and Harvard. Like, it clearly just doesn't matter.
And if she were more charismatic, she would pivot to sort of what Hillary Clinton was doing for a while there. The I was wronged and I deserve something and it was taken from me, so I must rally and charge huge amounts of money for speaking fees, right? She would just kind of make money off of being this woman who Trump stole her rightful place in the White House. But she's not charming enough. She's not a good speaker. And so in some ways we have to, not me specifically, but someone has to shuffle her off into a position where we can like bring her out to wave at political rallies, but not to give us any advice.
You know what she really could do, though? She could join up with Ella Emhoff and start attending those knitting clubs at bars on the Lower East Side in the back garden. And then she could do like little knit Kamala Harris dolls. And then those dolls could be featured in her niece's children's books. And they could just do like a whole new family undertaking of little stupid things.
Maybe.
I do think her husband might get an intern pregnant if she were to win. So that's something
that
we
would
could
be
think about
kind
for a
of
new
amazing.
scandal.
I mean, that
new
would be
scandal, right?
that would be
I said if I got to ask Kamala any questions, which I never will, I would love to say, you don't think Donald Trump has the character to be president. You've said that quite a lot. Yet you waited until you were 49 to get married and married a man who got his nanny pregnant to break up his first marriage.
Well,
why are you the judge of character?
And she never had any kids. And I wonder about that, actually, because she clearly had plenty of relationships. Why was this intent? Did she...
I think that goes to Kamala's insecurity.
You think so?
She's my theory, if I wanted to psychoanalyze her, she didn't get married till she was 49.
Mm-hmm.
She's an attractive woman. Mm-hmm. She was a lawyer. She passed the bar. Mm-hmm. She lived in California and was, in theory, a catch. Yet at 29 years old, she was sleeping with a married 60-year-old man.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a normal 29-year-old thing to do, which is
that
why
is an insecure 29-year-old thing to do. Someone who like doesn't have a father in her life,
Something's going on there.
She has no kids of her own. Yeah, there's Ella Emhoff and Ella Emhoff's brother, who we don't see that
we never know. We don't even know what his name is.
Ella Emhoff has an Instagram, and she does weird stuff on it.
Well, and after when Kamala became the VP, she got signed to some modeling agency. I mean, Ella Emhoff is like the poster child for like, do not send your kids to Brooklyn. Look at what happens to them.
She was got like signed like that day. The head of that agency, I forget who it was, showed up at the inauguration, and then Ella Emhoff got signed.
But I think it is why Kamala is so insecure. Because I think if she were married for a long time and she had kids, that provides you a semblance of normalcy outside of an abnormal arena. Mm-hmm. And so I think it keeps you from getting so wrapped up in your head and concerned about what other people think about you, because you actually have someone else who relies on you. Kamala's never had anyone in her entire life that has needed her for anything.
Should we make it a new constitutional amendment? You can't run for office unless you have children?
That would have kept James Buchanan out of it.
My first one would be you have to be under the age of 65, because I do think that age factors in. If you can't fly in an airplane, 70 I'd be okay with. Yeah. But if you can't fly an airplane, I don't think you should be able to be president of the United States. But I do think that having kids is like being religious. It tells us something, that there is something that matters more to you than power.
You can't be 71 at the time of inauguration would be the the rule, I think would be good.
If we gave 35 to 70, that's a 35-year window. But I mean, I think religion and kids, it one or the other, ideally both in many ways, shows that you matter, that something other than you matters.
Right.
You have supreme power.
What do you mean religion? Like in what way?
I mean that there is something larger,
like believing in God.
Yeah, believing in God of any type. I'm not saying like you have to be a particular religion, but just believing that there are moral consequences beyond your own life. And kids are that, right? To many, like I care more about my kids than anything. I think if you're pursuing the biggest power of all time, that has a balancing act.
I don't agree with that for a moral and philosophical reason. People believe a bunch of things, and I don't know. I wouldn't want to. I don't agree with that. I just whatever. But there's a better reason other than my personal feelings, which are irrelevant, and it's that they just lie. They'll be like, you got to believe in God. They'll be like, okay, I do. Here, let me swear on your Bible I don't believe in. So I think kids is a better metric.
Yeah.
You have to have a tie to the future.
But for someone who seems to have sacrificed everything for the pursuit of power and her professional career, Kamala does seem like a directionless person. Like, you started this by asking, where does she go from here? Like, if she loses, what's next for her?
Yeah.
And that's sort of fascinating because I think we all kind of agree, or at least I definitely feel like she is almost surprised she's in the position she's in at all. I mean, I think the fact that she was in a position to run for president was sort of surprising to her. She didn't really run a cohesive, intense campaign in 2020. It's sort of, she would put out these really liberal policies, but she didn't really gain the momentum as someone who's devoted their whole lives to rising to the top political office in America. And so to me, in addition to the family aspects, like, why didn't you prioritize having children? What happened there where marriage was sort of a last minute priority for you? What is she about? What are her directions? Because she's not even achieving a goal that seems to have been what her life would have been about. Did she even want to be here? What was Kamala Harris's purpose for all the things that she did up until now? Because you can't say anything about that.
Let me give you an example of that, I think. Kamala seems the most authentic version of herself when she talks about cooking.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And I mean, there are all different sorts of passions. Where I was making, like, I love history. And I love college football. I love the NFL. If you find someone's passion, we all seem to like Harry Potter. Like,
who doesn't?
You're not faking the way you react to something that you're passionate about.
Right.
And so when I've seen, to the extent that there is an authentic version of Kamala Harris, it's like, oh, I kind of buy in that she cares about spices, or that she cares about what her Thanksgiving dinner is going to be, or having people over and cooking, or breaking a freaking egg with one hand, which she seems really proud of. None of that for politics seems like actually it connects with her, which goes to the question of, did she just kind of end up doing what she did and there wasn't some game plan to it? It's just she took the next step every time.
She's the Mr. Magoo of politics.
Yeah,
she's
she's
bumbling
the Mr.
around,
Magoo.
no idea, like she's politically blind, and she walks on the the steel beam and then gets lifted up to the 10th floor and is walking in circles, has no idea what's going on, don't want to be there.
I mean, she's sleeping with the 60-year-old married guy. He gets her, and evidently nobody can talk about this, he gets her 2 jobs that pay her $400,000. That's a ton of money, right? And that leads
Especially back then.
That leads to this job. And then she's like, oh, I'm okay at this as a DA or whatever. I'll continue to take the next step. The reason why I think Kamala losing is so fascinating is because I don't know what she cares about enough to want to do if she didn't have the job.
Celebrity cooking show.
I mean, maybe so.
That would-
And by the way, what if she was incredibly likable on that? You might watch it and be like, hey, she seems like a really good person on
I got to be honest. If Kamala was sitting there and she was like, well, the first thing you got to do is you got to take the red peppers, I'd be okay with her laughing randomly for no reason. I'd be like, she's having a good time cutting those peppers.
Maybe instead
and then
of
you watch her put the olive oil on it.
Yeah, maybe instead of doing like a feminist girl boss podcast, she should go on like Rachel Ray's cooking show. She needs to do a show with Martha Stewart and whip something up.
And other
guys,
bubbly
this will
wine
be-
moms.
Yeah, this will be her next act. if she loses, God willing, this will be her next act. It will be Kamala's cooking show.
But I actually, you
It
guys,
will be
you
on
have
Netflix.
Kamala's kitchen cooking.
I love it.
You have a
Love it.
kitchen in here. Like
And you
I
know what?
could buy.
every episode. She would do a cuisine of a different nation and take on that accent.
By the way, this is going to be the next clip that they grab. It's going to be Clay Travis tells Kamala Harris to go back to the kitchen. This is what
I'll do it. I think that's an acceptable thing to say.
But I actually think she would really enjoy that job and be honest when she's talking about what her favorite recipe is. I don't think she has a foundational core. I think that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
What does she really desperately care about?
Do you think at night she goes to Doug and she's like, I just want to quit, but I know I can't. And he's like, you got to keep going. We could be in the White House. Like, maybe she doesn't want to do this.
I think on some level, like Al Gore, I don't think ever really liked being a politician, but he just wanted to make his dad happy.
Oh, is
and
that
so he
right?
kept doing
That was
it.
a dad thing.
Yeah, I think it came from his dad, who was a senator, and like it's just like kind of the direction that he went. And then when he lost, he seemed so much happier not being involved in politics.
He got
at
to
all.
like make his stupid movies about lies about climate change.
But that was his
True passions.
But I mean, but think about that. That was his passion.
Yeah,
like
sure
he
was.
became. I mean, he's a Tennessee senator. It's not like people in my state are sitting around like, hey, no, we really care about the polar ice caps melting. But that desperately mattered to him. And I don't. What would Kamala do? I think cooking might be the answer.
Yeah.
I think it's
Let's jump to this story from NBC News. This is crazy. 2 U.S. Marines assaulted in Turkey by nationalist mob chanting "Yankee go home." A video of the incident showed someone placing a bag over the head of the Marine. So this happened in what city was this? It was in Turkey, and it was Izmir. So these were, what were these? Were these Marines? Because I've heard it reported both that they were just Navy, but others saying that they were Marines.
I've always seen Marine.
I've seen
I thought it was
Marines.
Marines as well.
Yeah. The group restrained one Marine before one of them places a bag over his head. Moments later, another man can be seen charging the group. None of the service members are in uniform. I'll pull that video up in a second, but I want to jump to this too. I want this to be a part of it. Turkey is seeking to join BRICS. This is massive on the global stage. Turkey joins BRICS, putting Western control of the Bosphorus at risk. Not that we're very happy with how Turkey operates as it is, but the Bosphorus connects the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. So this is shifting global power from NATO in the West into BRICS, which means big bad things for the United States. You combine these kinds of stories with Turkish nationalists attacking U.S. personnel.
We have real problems.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost as though the best thing for the United States would be to close the border, become energy independent, and bring American manufacturing back.
Okay, Donald Trump.
Perhaps.
It is funny how we have
Crazy
solutions to
idea.
these problems,
We do
and
have
we
some
just apparently
solutions.
cannot implement them without, I don't know, being racist? Question mark?
I think this
Question
goes
mark.
to we have an inability to acknowledge good and evil exist in the country and the
We have
world.
an inability to acknowledge good and evil, and it's because we abandoned religion.
I
And
think-
we replaced God with the false idol of self and replaced the soul with gender. And now we have completely and totally lost our way. Gender and identity. You could put both of those
We
in.
do have the video. We can pull this up. It's they just are screaming and they look at this. Wow. And they start punching him. So apparently a bunch of these guys got arrested, but BRICS wants their own currency. Saudi Arabia is off the petrodollar. Oil is being traded internationally in yuan and rubles. The
And we're
American
cutting-
empire is
yeah,
done.
And we're cutting back on Gulf of Mexico drilling for some reason because the Biden and Harris administration doesn't want us to do that anymore.
So question, because we've talked about this a couple of years ago. Is this the intentional decline of the United States in order to avoid Thucydides' trap?
that was sort of the Obama thing, right? That was sort of the rumor of Obama, that he thought that his job was to manage the decline of the United States.
The fear being that with China rising on the global scale, a rising economic power, whenever there's a rising economic power that is on the verge of supplanting the dominant power, there is a very high tendency for large-scale war to break out. The liberal economic order has believed since the 50s, these is Council on Foreign Relations people, high-level U.S. and European politicians believe that another world war would end humanity. So is this them saying, okay, transfer our assets to China, China's taking over, and the United States, and move on?
I actually think China's decline is more dangerous than America's decline. And this is where I come in with where I think Elon Musk is correct. You were mentioning the climate change and all those things. And you asked about kids and presidents and everything else, which I think is an interesting question. China's population's peaked. And if you look at the projections because of the one-child China, in the next
one-child policy?
Yeah, in the next 50 or 60 years, China's population could be cut in half.
They got rid of that, though.
Now they have, but the problem is
it's late.
So locked in,
Yeah.
and they had so many more male children than female children and all those things.
Yeah, they killed their lady.
They had a lot of
babies.
But one of the aspects of history, if you study it, is wars often happen not when countries are at their peak power, but when the peak power has passed and you can see a rapid decline coming, which is why I worry that China in a decline begins to act more aggressively than China on the ascent. Because if China thought, hey, in 40 years, we're going to be the superior economy to the United States, I think they could afford to wait. My concern is in 40 years, China's going to be severely diminished. And I think my concern on the United States side there is in 1980, I was mentioning Jimmy Carter. He got defeated to a large, for many reasons, but one was because Iran had taken the hostages and he was so weak that he couldn't get them back. Hirsch Goldberg, Poland's mother, spoke at the DNC. And a few weeks later, Hamas put a bullet in the back of that kid's head.
They trotted her out on stage to beg for her son's life.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then she just spoke at her son's funeral.
Yeah.
And Hamas disrespected American power to such an extent and did not fear our retaliation that they put a bullet in that kid's head right after his mom spoke at the DNC.
Wow.
Evil, and I do believe Hamas is evil, responds to fear and power. They have no fear of us, and they do not believe that we have the power to act.
Well, and they're kind of right because, the United States instructed Israel on how to conduct their self-defense and said, stay out of Rafah. And now an American's been killed. An American civilian's been killed.
Did you see the report that a Kremlin official had said Kamala Harris is more predictable than Trump? I think on a lot of fronts internationally, everyone looks at the Biden-Harris administration and the potential Harris-Walz administration as a signal of the downturn of America. It signals weakness. They know that they can do
Well, of course it does signal weakness.
If they know they'll be able to do things, and they have been able to do things under Biden, that Trump would just never allow. And part of that is just inherent personality. Trump is better on the international stage, and he brings more diplomatically to the White House than anyone the Democrats have currently offered up.
Putin and Xi fear Trump because they're not sure of what he's going to do.
Well, and that's one of the best things about Trump is that he's unpredictable. So, if you come out there and do something terrible to the United States, Trump might just be like, nuke him. And that's perfectly plausible. And I love that.
But he breaks game theory.
Yes.
That's what it is. Like,
Because
what Biden's going to do or what Kamala's going to do because
they're going to do like a proportionate response, and they're going to say like give a little.
You got a poker table in here. The toughest guy to play poker against is a guy you don't know whether he's bluffing or not.
Oh,
it can make different choices based on that.
Well, let's play that analogy because I love it. When you're playing against your average player in poker, you have a general idea of the kind of hands they're going to play, the moves they're going to make, and you try to predict them. But when someone shows up who doesn't know what they're doing, this is fascinating. I'll try to explain this in the least jargony way possible. If you're playing with a bunch of regular guys and they're all of moderate skill, are you a big player?
I'm not great. I'm not great at math, sadly, but I love poker. So yes.
So you might. if I'm playing at a game and I know that all the players are regulars. They play all the time. I might actually try to exploit that and play a weaker hand. Maybe I could bluff. Maybe I can try and come underneath. What does that mean? So if two guys are making big bets, they might both have ace king. They might, and then they're blocking each other. It's called. So I might play 5-6 suited, which is a lower percentage chance to win. But because they're bumping into each other, I'm going to take them both out. The problem arrives when a dude shows up who's dumb as a box of rocks, but loaded and bets on anything and everything.
Can't read him.
It restricts you to only a very small range of hands to play because the guy's going to bet everything no matter what. And there's something called fold equity. I mean, I'm getting too jargony. The point is this. When you get a wild card like Trump, you have to play as tight and as close to the chest as possible because there's no room for error. There's no bluffing. Trump's going to call you down. You say, I'm going to invade. I'll nuke you. And you go, he might.
Yeah.
You know Biden won't do it. Biden's scared of fallout. Trump, you might be thinking, Trump's more scared of his base. And his base wants action. So Trump had that famous interview, the phone call, where he said, he told Xi and Putin, he told Xi, if you invade Taiwan, I'm going to nuke Beijing. And Putin, if you invade Ukraine, I'm going to nuke Moscow. He's like, I don't know if they believed me, maybe 5%, but it was enough.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. And that bothers the quote unquote foreign relations experts because they want to have their back channel conversations and say, well, if you do X, then we're going to do Y. But those authoritarians don't respect the general rules. And so you need people who are willing to upset the calculus. And I think Trump was. I don't think that Putin would have ever invaded Ukraine if Trump were president. I don't think Hamas would have attacked on October 7th Israel like they did if Trump were president. I really don't.
Looking, like the Wall Street Journal had extensive reporting on the planning of that attack, and it started after Biden came into office.
Yes.
That's when it started because they knew that there was a weakness. They knew that Biden was vulnerable to his anti-Israel base, and they went for it. And that was planned.
More importantly, the Ukraine tensions were escalating under Obama intentionally, and everything froze when Donald Trump got in for a variety of reasons. One, the decimation of ISIS. Under Obama, ISIS was growing and growing out of control. Trump gets in, Ukraine escalation stops, ISIS obliterated. Biden gets back in, everything kicks back off again.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is also true, again, of Russia. If you look at the prisoner swap that just happened recently, I think the only American prisoner who wasn't held captive in Russia or detained in Russia before Biden got into office was Paul Whelan, the U.S. Marine. Everyone else was after Biden was in office. And, you know, you can say all kinds of things. There's a lot to be skeptical of that prisoner swap, but I really do think that there's a strategic reason that Americans became more vulnerable to being wrongfully detained in Russia after Biden became president. Russia knows Biden is not able to negotiate, and they're looking at Kamala Harris and saying, cool, round two.
Well, how about the fact that we got Brittany Griner and they got the Merchant of Death?
Right. They got the
by the way, she actually violated Russian drug law. So it's not as if she was just grabbed and did nothing wrong. This wasn't, they're claiming, obviously, that Evan Gersovich was just a Wall Street Journal reporter and did nothing at all wrong. Brittany Griner admitted she violated Russian drug law, and they got the Merchant of Death back during a friggin' war, and we got a WNBA player?
Right.
I mean, it's like the worst trade of all time.
But they left Mark Fogel, who in a similar position
Correct.
also violated Russian drug law, but is in much worse condition than Brittany Griner. He's got all kinds of health problems. He's older, and he didn't come home in the prison.
He has the problem that can't be handled, which is he's a white guy.
Yeah.
I mean, Brittany Griner, if she wasn't a black lesbian basketball player, would still be, if that was a white guy who did what Brittany Griner did, wasn't an athlete, wasn't famous, that person would still be in prison.
Do you remember Biden released all the photo ops with her I don't know, spouse, wife, whatever, from the Oval Office, being like, I was just there having this moment. Like, they use that as a celebrity photo op. And yet all of these Americans were detained in Russia because of the Biden administration, because he is a weak president. Again, Harris is, I would say, probably worse.
Which is where Trump is right on negotiation. The thing that Trump gets better than anybody is leverage. You give him, I mean, that's all that real estate guys do, right? They find a leverage point and then they exploit it. And Trump rightly pointed out that every time we make a trade with a terrorist organization in this way, we just incentivize the arrest of more Americans to create more bargaining chips for Russia or other maladroit actors out there.
Well, indeed.
You guys feeling confident in the Harris-Walz presidency? Because I'm not.
Yeah, I hope that the joy does not propel them into the White House.
So I learned something interesting today. Did you guys know that New Order was actually Joy Division?
Yes.
Yeah, Joy Division, the lead singer, committed suicide. It's very sad.
Yeah.
And the band didn't want to carry on. They had agreed to with the rest of the band that should, and they would never regroup under the same name if one member were to leave. And because of this, they said we need a new band. Became New Order. Of course, New Order has Blue Monday, which is one of the highest selling songs of all time. And Joy Division was the name of a Nazi unit. Mm-hmm. And they had to come out and say, that is not the intention of the name. That's not what we meant.
Well, but you know what the Joy Division was?
What was it?
The Joy Division were call girls.
What, really?
Yeah, that was the Joy Division. The Joy Division.
And the Nazis?
Yeah, well, they were call girls to serve the Nazis.
Wow.
So when Joy Division made that,
Is that what Kamala Harris is talking about now?
well, when
Is that why they're calling her the Joy candidate?
when Joy Division
This
made
is
that name,
what?
they were not saying like we're pro-Nazi. They were saying like Nazis were exploiting women in this way.
No, I
And,
think
like,
they said that Joy Division was unrelated. I could be wrong. I don't know.
Oh, well, whatever it is, if they were using it for that, that's what that was. That's what the Joy Division was.
But how good of a song is True Faith? I mean, talk
It's a
about
great song.
Great song. Yeah,
that
absolutely.
goes on like so many of my playlists.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A
it's
great
excellent.
band.
Do you know there's a great, the podcast?
I have no idea. I don't know that I know this song.
You
Is this
absolutely-
gonna-
you
is
know
this-
the
you know the
song. You
song.
know the song.
These are
There's
like
this,
quintessentially 80s
there's
songs.
this-
Can we
there's
pull
this
it up?
Podcast Song
I'm the worst
Exploder.
at song names and bands and everything else. I know college.
We'll get it
football-
for you in the members show.
Do you know
Yes,
this
yes.
song?
You know Blue Monday, right?
Yes, I know that song. Of
course.
Yes.
Do you know Song Exploder, that podcast? So they did a breakdown of I think it was Blue Monday, and they were talking to the original band members of New Order, and I forget the name of the guy who sang it, but he was like not a singer.
Yeah.
And none of them wanted to sing, and none of them wanted to take the place of the former, was it Ian Schrager? None of them
what that
wanted
is.
to.
I will say
take his
this.
place.
I live in Nashville. Hearing songwriters explain how their songs came to be is to me one of the great under-discussed aspects of all of music.
Well, that's what this podcast.
Yeah, right,
Song
that's what I'm saying.
Exploder
It's a
is
great idea.
It's a really good podcast.
Oh, I love the Kurt Cobain stories. You know how Kurt Cobain's songs came to be?
Ian Curtis.
He was Ian
Yeah,
Curtis. there you
Serge
go.
has it. Ian,
He was high
Ian
on drugs
Schrager
and
is the
groaning.
New York hotelier.
So I knew some people who knew Kurt when I lived in Seattle briefly.
Yeah.
Older guys had worked in the music industry, and they were like, a lot of the stuff that he wrote, he was just high. And just that's why, like, if you look at Smells Like Teen Spirit, what is that even about?
Or even
So many of the best
Some of his
songs are about
songs-
nothing.
To be fair, Nirvana songs actually, a lot of them they are about things for sure. But some of them were just not.
I think that's okay. I don't think you have to be about something every time.
Well, I think most music today is about nothing. It's not,
Well-
not about anything.
Today it's about self-aggrandizement primarily, I think.
except for Taylor Swift, who's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how I wonder when we look back at the songs that have a big impact compared to where they were at the time. I think the impact of Fortunate Son, for instance, is substantially larger after the fact than it was at the time. It was a big song, of course, but these days it's like representative of an era of the protest of anti-war. You know,
I was reading, this is the 25th anniversary of The Matrix, right? Which came out, I believe, in 1999. And if you remember, obviously, the reason why it's set in 1999 in the movie is because they say that America peaked in 1999. It's technically 200 years later or whatever it is. I kind of think we might have peaked in 1999.
Listen, the
I agree.
1990s,
I mean, 25 years later, I think it seems like even more
1990s
true.
Was
Greatest
the
genera-
cultural reward for everything horrible we'd gone through, and that's what we got. We got like Calvin Klein wearing black. We got Kate Moss and
Everybody
great
got along.
music.
Rap music was
Killer
at its
nightclubs.
apex, I would argue. Rock music was at its apex. Now, you can have some fun debates if everybody else out there wants. Like, I think you can argue 80s versus 90s, but in almost anything, and it's a great debate. I think.
90s.
I agree with you. I think the 90s, but
80s is my favorite. I love 80s music, but everything was like, if you were to line up all the decades, it's like they're all moving in this direction, and then the 80s happens, and then the 90s happens. But the 90s was the last
90s
decade.
was very chill. So,
Last decade.
Can I tell a really quick story? So I had these friends who were visual artists in the 90s, and we were all in New York, and they got a gig to make the mothership for P-Funk, and they got like thousands of dollars to make this mothership to come out on stage, but they didn't make it. They didn't do anything. Instead, they took us all out for massive sushi dinners, and
They just had fun with it.
and we all got really messed up and did a lot of drugs and stuff. And then it was 2 nights before they had to turn in their thing and have their project, and they're all at the big warehouse, and they made it out of tinfoil PVC pipe.
was the result good?
The result was awesome. It was a
Yes,
killer.
it was the
result.
90s. Of course it was.
We got to go to Super Chats, but I want to say the 90s was the last decade. And what I mean by that is that if you look at the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, they all have this cultural distinction. The 80s, the 80s, didn't they? I mean, leopard print hot pants. Come on, it's nuts. And in the 90s, you had the baggy jeans with the holes in the knees and alternative music, Jankos. The 2000s have something. There's something there. There's maybe like a little bit of like pop punky emo stuff.
It really seems like the internet kind of ended this. I mean, everything you're describing is basically
It was also the 9/11. 9/11 ended a lot of
I don't think 9/11 ended.
I think it's the internet. Because I think the early 2000s, it was less so. There was some internet. It was on the rise. But by 2010, we were an internet culture.
And now culture is
still
just
doing it. Morrissey is still out there being based. And he came out of the 80s and the 90s.
There's no unified culture anymore.
No,
we got to go to Super Chats. So smash the like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends, and head over to timcast.com. Click join us, become a member, because now more than ever, we need your support on this one. I'm going to stress this again. If you agree with our taking action against the Harris campaign for defamation, we need your support. Some have suggested we launch a GoFundMe. I will never use a GoFundMe. So that would be a give, send, go. I don't know that I want to do that, but we may have to. Understand that these challenges are very difficult. But I think we can't stand for the deranged lies that have come to this extreme degree. So we need your support. Timcast.com. Click join us. But let's read your Super Chats. Clint Torres, he's back. Howdy, people. He says, this is for the impending lawsuit. The lying with impunity of present day needs all the pushback we can muster. Good sir, I appreciate it. Welcome back. And as always, when you decide to be, you're first. Shane Wilder says, best of luck with the legal action. They need to realize this cannot stand. We need precedent. We need new precedent. It is insane to me that, let's say you, Clay, lie about Libby.
Yep.
And you didn't know. Well, I shouldn't say lie. You were wrong. You were wrong. You said Libby kicked a dog.
Misinformation.
Libby says, I never kicked a dog. And you say, well, I'm reporting based on a photo of your foot out and the dog flying in the air. Multiple sources say, so I think it's true and I think that's fair. So Libby sues for defamation. Times v. Sullivan kicks in. You got that first. And it's, well, did he know? First, it's a motion to dismiss. The judge says, this is the news. Get out of here. Let's say in the course of this, the conclusion is, actually, he was wrong. Libby has the video showing that the dog actually jumped in the air and she tripped and fell backwards. It was totally not her kicking a dog. And there is no remedy for the news outlet that falsely published that you kicked a dog. So long as you said, at the time we didn't know, you are allowed to keep the article up and continue to make money and share it with no correction.
That's rude.
That's insane that we live in this society. My argument is the remedy should be simple. We can keep anti-SLAPP. We can keep Times v. Sullivan. And then in the event, you go to court and you say, the first thing is when you sue, present to the judge your evidence of why what they're saying is false. So Libby kicked a dog. She says, Your Honor, here's a video. The dog was never kicked. Here's their claim. It is false. The judge goes, did you know this was false? No, I didn't. Discovery. There's no evidence he knew it was false. Okay, sir, you have to take it down and apologize. That doesn't exist. They just say he didn't know it was false. He's allowed to lie.
Times v. Sullivan is an outdated First Amendment case. And I've been arguing for a long time that it needs to be updated. And I worked in media. I still work in media, obviously, ran and still run to a large degree Outkick. But I believe there should be consequences when you are beyond negligent. In the same way, take it outside of this. If you drive a car and you are behaving in a manner that is beyond just mere negligence, you can be charged with a criminal offense if you hit somebody on a street, right?
Wait. So are you saying criminal charges for defamation?
No, but there are different standards of gradation beyond mere negligence. There's criminal negligence. Right. There's manslaughter, right? You can take different steps. I think the standard of negligence can be applied to written articles.
But it is. It's the malice. It's the malice or reckless disregard for the truth.
But that standard is virtually impossible to meet because they've created public and private figure distinctions.
Right.
There is no public and private distinction when you're driving a car and you hit somebody. You're not like, oh, that person was famous, so they're more deserving of getting hit by a car. Yep. So we have a different standard. I don't believe in the modern era that there should be a difference between a public and a private figure, I think we have to go back and redefine it. In the 1960s, most people's name never ended up in the newspaper.
Right.
So it would make sense in some way that you would say, okay, this newspaper, which has scads of lawyers reviewing everything before it's published, is only writing about public figures because most people's names only appeared the day you were born, day you died, right? Nowadays, every single person is one viral post away from being the Hawk Tuah girl, and everybody in the whole planet knows your name.
They claimed the Covington kid was an involuntary public figure, so the standard applied. The Times.
And so what happens on a lot of these cases, Covington kid's a perfect example. Nicholas Sandman, if I remember his name correctly,
right, yeah.
They settled that case because CNN and the Washington Post
millions.
and all those people.
Did he get millions? We don't know that.
We don't know for
we
sure.
don't know if they ever came out. He was awarded millions.
Well, the numbers are not public.
Yeah.
We know that he settled the cases. I don't think that it's ever come out exactly what he got. My point is, most of the time, people like that settle cases rather than roll the dice and try to set new precedents.
Right.
And so we need a new precedent that goes all the way. I'll give you another example. The Fox lawsuit that got settled. I think
Dominion?
Fox Dominion.
Fox was 100, in my opinion, Fox was 100% right and would have won that case if they had taken it all the way to the Supreme Court. And they may well have come out with a new standard in our modern digital era for how we handle this.
And we will do it.
That's what I'm saying. Somebody needs to take it all the way and allow, because there's several justices who have said Times v. Sullivan is antiquated based on our modern media era. We need an update.
Just for people who don't know, that means if you're a public figure and someone lies about you, you have to be able to prove that they knew they were lying or it was reckless disregard for the truth. The problem is, and you also have anti-SLAPP. I don't completely disagree, but there has to be new precedent. So the issue is the corporate press, I'll tell you a story, lied about me. One of these activist lefty journalists at a major corporation published fake news. So Activist Rights blog. Corporate journalist at major big three takes the source, publishes article. It gets picked up by 3 different tabloids. The corporate outlet then removes the portion of the story and cuts out the source. So now it's no longer in the story. The tabloids all then reference each other.
Yep.
When I sent an email to the first, I said, this is factually incorrect. And they say, our reporting is based on this article right here. We are only saying they reported it. We are not saying it. I contacted the next outlet and they said, no, we did not claim you did this. We are only reporting what outlet C said. See, we're referencing what they said. I go to the next outlet and say, no, we're only referencing what outlet A said. So what happens is you have 3 outlets, A, B, and C, and A cites B, B cites C, C cites A, and argues we are not responsible for this information because we are not reporting it. We are only referencing it, but it creates this infinite loop.
Yes.
It's defamation genesis, whatever you want to call it, defamation genesis.
Let me give you a good example of this I had in my most recent book. If it were just negligence, if they just screwed up every now and then, no matter what you do, every now and then, people screw up. I mean, that's life. We're imperfect. How many stricken positive articles that were negligent have the Washington Post, the New York Times, NPR published about Donald Trump that were beneficial to him, that were just negligent in his favor?
Politico has 2 articles up right now. One saying Ukraine interfered in the 2016 election to help Hillary Clinton, and another saying the story that Hillary Clinton was helped by Ukraine is Russian disinformation. These people are evil.
But I mean, do you see the point? Like, if they were just negligent, Trump would benefit. There would be a story like Donald Trump saved 8 kittens from drowning in the Potomac River. And you'd be like, oh, that was super nice of him. I'm glad he likes kittens. And then they would come out and say, actually, sorry, we got that one wrong. Name me a pro-Trump story that they have gotten wrong. It doesn't happen.
All right, let's read this one. Cameron says, do you guys think Virginia is in play for Trump? Yes, because Virginia is going paper ballot.
This is where I come back and I say, if Virginia ends up super close and Glenn Youngkin could have added 50,000 votes to Trump, which I think he could have, that could have been the knockout blow. I love JD. I think he was a good choice, but politically, I'm not sure that he changed the calculus in any substantial way. I think you guys tell me, do you think Glenn Youngkin could have added 50,000 votes to Trump in Virginia?
I mean,
I think he maybe could have.
Maybe, but I don't think he is as big a name as J.D. Vance is. I think J.D. Vance brings more to the Trump campaign. And historically, vice presidential candidates don't necessarily guarantee you an election. They influence public opinion, but they don't necessarily guarantee electoral votes. What I find fascinating about the timing of choosing J.D. Vance is, again, he's a fresh politician, but he has experience in the Senate. And I always go back to this. Everyone who's listening will get so tired of me saying it, but I think hillbilly elegy has a profound impact on the American psyche because the people I knew who were referencing it were all, intense liberal women. And I think that is a long-term investment in the future of the MAGA movement. Glenn Youngkin maybe would have done something, but I don't know that he could really go to bat for Trump the way J.D. Vance has proven that he can.
I think J.D. Vance makes sense in the Midwest. I actually think coming off of the assassination attempt, Trump wanted somebody who would actually be super conservative behind him to try. I mean, I think this factored in on some level. If somebody tried to kill him, if you know that you've got Nikki Haley in the background, do you sit around and worry that that's going to incentivize that from occurring again? I wonder if that didn't factor in. But if it comes down to 50,000 votes, I think you're right generally. There aren't very many examples, though, of somebody making a choice to try to deliver a specific state because it's so rare. So it's a hard hypothesis to test out because it would also require that it be close, right? I think Kamala made the wrong decision when she didn't take Shapiro.
Oh, agreed.
Yeah.
I think she should have 100% taken him.
Well, I think that there
Waltz.
was a concerted effort to get her to not take Shapiro because he's actually good at his job. He's
Also
well
Jewish.
liked in Pennsylvania.
I
Yeah,
think
there's
that
the
factored
Jewish
in,
thing
too.
as well too because he's pro-Israel.
And he would have outshined her.
Let's jump into
That's
this.
the thing. Yeah.
We got this the super chat from Hotel Llama saying Trump said he wants to legalize weed on Lex interview, supports the initiative in Florida as an example of how to do it. Good move. I agree with him. A lot of conservatives are mad. They don't want weed legalized. I have friends who think weed should not be legalized. But I take a more libertarian stance on this. I'm not a big fan of pot. I don't smoke. Not a fan of people who smoke all the time. I don't mind if people are, in their own homes doing whatever they want, but I'm not a big fan of it. But I do believe it's the right move, and I believe Trump should have, and I said this back in 2020, mass pardon nonviolent offenders who did not accept plea deals on marijuana charges. So it would require a large review. We don't want somebody who was criminally charged for marijuana possession at the federal level a lot, but it was actually that he was in a shootout and then he pled down. So I said Trump should pardon all these guys. Look, I said Trump should bring on Tulsi Gabbard. I said Trump should do the weed thing. He's doing it now. It's the right move.
I agree with Tulsi. I don't have a strong opinion on the weed thing. My concern is moving beyond weed. But if I had to choose,
Oregon did that. Oregon did that.
And I think
they pulled it back.
I think you look at a lot of those left coast cities that have legalized weed, and it hasn't gone well because I think it's liberalized drug use laws. And I used to be a guy who was like, I think you should just legalize and tax most drugs. I think that left-wing cities have tried that, and it's kind of a disaster. But if I had to choose between, hey, do you want your kid using alcohol all the time or smoking weed occasionally? I'd rather my kid smoke weed occasionally than drink every day, personally.
I think there's a big faction of the Republican Party that's sort of crunchy in a weird way. And the challenge with marijuana is that the way it's classified right now, it's very difficult to study. And so it's really one of these things where, generally, I think that all substances can be harmful depending on your personality and your genetic makeup. And I agree with you. I think making them legalized in a lot of states has encouraged other abuse of drugs and caused a lot of other problems. But with marijuana specifically, I think that, if we don't study it, we don't really know how to interpret it. And so there's a level of I don't know that it should be legal, but I definitely think that we should treat it like something we're studying, which we can't really do.
Well, there's
right
a weird thing, though, with legal weed, which is that since weed got legalized, it's become a hell of a lot stronger.
Yeah.
And way more intense and crazy. And I remember back in the good old days in the 90s, I'd buy a dime bag and it would have seeds and stems in it. And you can't buy stuff like that anymore. You can't buy mid-level weed at this point.
Swag.
Yeah. Yeah, like what they were selling at the coffee shop, whatever. But, you can't, that doesn't exist. So now when kids are getting into legal weed, it's insane. It's like psychedelics. They may as well be dropping LSD.
I also think it'd be funny if he had said, and I'm going to bomb the cartels. Because then you just cover both sides. Like, yeah, I'm going to get into people who are like mad about the weed, but you're like, okay, we're really going to try to stop fentanyl from coming in and killing 100,000 people.
New York did this weird thing where they decriminalized weed, and then all the corner bodegas started selling weed with absolutely no regulation. And then the state tried to do a thing where, the first weed licenses go to people who had been formerly incarcerated for weed charges. And they tried to get all the bodegas to stop selling like loose joints and whatever else. And there's no way to pull that back. So now there's like an illegal yet decriminalized trade in marijuana in every corner store in the city. And there's people who were formerly incarcerated getting prioritized for proper licenses who are actually paying the taxes, thereby getting penalized.
You know what's fascinating to me about the weed thing is we basically have eliminated cigarette smoking among young people and replaced it with weed. Like my kids,
vape for now.
My kids, when they see someone actually smoking a cigarette, it's like someone shooting up with heroin. They're like, "Oh my God, Dad,
it's terrible.
He's smoking a cigarette." But now they're, it is kind of amazing how we just shift what the morally acceptable. Meanwhile, when we were kids growing up, Mom and Grandma are just smoking like crazy, and the windows rolled up.
All right, we got this from Sean. He says, Tim, please convince Clay to come back for your Culture War show with Keith Olbermann.
Do you know about that? Keith Olbermann used
I know who he is. He's nuts.
He's crazy.
But he was, when I was a kid, I would wake up in the morning, I would put on ESPN SportsCenter because I had to go to bed before the games ended. I would sit and eat my cereal, and I would watch Keith Olbermann on television with Dan Patrick. And if you had told me when I was 13, Keith Olbermann will ever know your name, I would have thought that I was the baddest ass person on the planet. Keith Olbermann is an insane man.
Yeah.
And he comes after me all the time. And I read it and I'm like, this is maybe a good example for your point about he's over 50. He's never gotten married. He doesn't have any kids. And I think at some point, if you get to that age, maybe particularly if you're male, you just get so wrapped up in your own craziness that your world spirals out of control.
I think the important thing to understand too is when you're young, you have friends by force. You make friends because you're in school or
That's a great point.
Your parents are going someplace and there's other kids in the play area or whatever. And so as you get older and you no longer are forced in this position, this is why people after high school, they don't hang out anymore. You go to different colleges. While you're in college, you make different friends. It's because you're just not in the same places and you don't really have a choice. When you're older and you're out of college, now it's work. You know your friends from work. You talk to them. Some of them you don't even like, but you're there because it's your job. And then where are your friends from college? Well, they moved for a job, and then you start having less and less friends. But this is how life goes. You then have a wife or a husband. You then have children. Then you have a family. You periodically go on vacation, see some of your old friends and their kids, and then your company is your family. For someone like Keith Olbermann, and many people like him, especially what's-her-face, that lady who wakes up in the morning to masturbate. What's her name?
Chelsea Handler.
Yes, Chelsea Handler.
Hates self-indulgence.
They don't have friends. And what I don't mean to say that there's like literally no one hanging out with them. Of course they have friends hanging out. I'm saying they're at a point in their lives where friendship is not the same as it used to be. And they attach themselves to social media because they need social interaction. Whereas people with kids spend time with their kids and they spend time with their families. And that's where their concern is. It's very inward as for people like Keith Olbermann. He has nothing but the external social interactions he gets from going online. He doesn't have the buddies coming by to play video games where he's older than that. So they don't come by to play ball or go for a ride anymore. The only social interaction he's going to get is going on social media. I got to tell you, Keith, the poker tables are good fun. That's where the retirees go. You cash your Social Security check, you sit down, you fold every hand until you get aces, and then you bet, and then you win, and you sit there all day. That's what they do for their social interaction, and I approve of that.
There also is studies,
golf.
you guys
Golf
may
is
be able to
social.
speak to this. Women seem better at preserving relationships as they age than men are.
This is something I hear from my guy friends. They'll be like, "You're still friends with that person?" And it's
Okay,
like,
but,
yeah.
but yes, there's a comedian, I forgot his name, he had this great bit where he said, so a friend of mine recently got divorced and I hadn't seen him in a while and decided to go play a round of golf with him. And so we went. When I came back, my wife said, so how's he doing? And I went, I don't know. And she was like, what?
Yeah.
She's like, well, is he seeing someone? He's like, didn't come up. And she's like, are you friends with this person? Like, yeah. She's like, did you talk to him? It's like, we played golf.
Yeah.
Like, that's what guys do. That's it.
funny
You have
because
no idea.
I talked to my son's best friend. I've said this before, but he moved to Morocco with, his family or whatever. And they'll still play video games. They'll like play, Xbox, and they'll both be online and they'll be done. And they will have been playing for like 2 hours or something. And I'll be like, oh, how's he doing? How's school? How's his family? How's everything going? And my son will be like, I don't know.
I got it. I figured it out. So we're trying to set up this private club on the second floor of our coffee shop. We're going to get a ratty old couch. We're going to get a old 90s television with or early 2000s box TV with an original Xbox. And it's going to be for late 30s guys to come and hang out having pizza and Mountain Dew just once.
Sounds, by the way, amazing to me already. And I'm a little bit too old.
Just once in a while to be like, that's what we used to do in college. Because there's this meme where it was like, this guy's telling a story where he was like, me and my friends met up after class. We go to my buddy's house. We ordered a couple extra large pepperoni pizzas, brought a bunch of Mountain Dew, played Xbox, played Halo split screen all night, laughing, making jokes. It got to about 1 or 2 in the morning, stood up. Everybody was laughing and having a good time, went to the door and said, later, guys, see ya. We'll play again next week. We never played again for that. I wonder where those guys went. One day was the last day you hung out with your buddies and you didn't realize it.
I hate that. Do you know?
Oh, man, that is like...
You said that story like ages ago, and now I think about it all the time, and I'll be like, oh, is this the last time I'm going to do this with my kid?
Okay, hold all right, one for you.
The thing is, men and women socialize differently. Like, if you've read the book Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, John Gray talks about the fact that men go to lunch to solve a problem. Like, you go to talk about something.
Women go to lunch to just chat,
to gather
and
information, and it's
be
important.
And everyone gets to tell their story about the thing their husband did.
There's a reason that my college group of girlfriends, the first night of our weekend together after a year or several months apart, we opened with a slideshow presentation on the updates in everyone's life. And I told this to a male friend, and he was like, this is insane. What are you doing? But I genuinely want to know. Whereas the video game thing resembles the problem solving. So we have come to play the game and then to leave.
So on top of the hanging out with your buddies thing, one day you picked up your child for the last time and you didn't know it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I've got my 9-year-old and I still walk around with him on my shoulders.
Yeah, but no, you have a 9-year-old.
Fighting that day.
So
I can't pick up my child anymore. He is now
large.
4 inches taller than me. He's got
wait,
hold on, let me tell you this.
We got to go to the members show.
I bought the Nintendo old school. I'll tell this story on the member show.
But I will say the last thing is there's a funny meme where the a guy says he saw that post. So he walked over to his 20-something-year-old son and lifted him up. And his son was like, Dad, what are you doing? And he's like, I saw this thing that said you picked up your kid for the last time, so I wanted to do it one more time. Anyway, smash the like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Head over to timcast.com. You can click sign up on the top right or click join us, become a member. The members-only show is coming up right now, and we're going to talk about serious news that not so family friendly, but always fun. And we're going to explain New Order, True Faith to our good friend Clay over here. So because he knows it. But again, you can follow me on X at Timcast. Become a member at timcast.com. We need your support right now. Clay, do you want to shout anything out?
I had an awesome time. I'm looking forward to hanging out for another hour. Appreciate you guys having me. My wife just texted me and said, Blue Monday was my first floor music in gymnastics. So I told her to watch. So there you go.
Okay.
It's like the highest.
She is a genius on music, by the way, unlike me.
I think Blue Monday is the highest selling 12-inch single of all time or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And I've got a 8-bit Nintendo story on the flip side.
Let's get it.
Where can people follow you?
At Clay Travis. The one that I do myself is Twitter. I know I'm on Instagram and TikTok too, but or whatever else they put me. But
your image is on those places.
Yeah, they put videos up, but I do. Every tweet is from me. So if you're interested in me, I'm at Clay Travis.
I'm Libby Emmons. You can find me on Twitter at Libby Emmons. I also do my own tweets. I know that's shocking for everyone to believe. You can also check out everything we're doing at thepostmillennial.com and humanevents.com. And if you want to hear from me every day, you can subscribe to my newsletter, which I also do myself, which is thepostmillennial.com/Libby.
It's been so fun having you here, Libby. It's always fun to see you. I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer for scnr.com. That's Scanner News. Check out all of our work at Timcast News. It's a really great team. If you want to follow me personally, I'm on Instagram at hannahclaire.b, where I do all my own posts. That's why there haven't been any in a really long time. And I'm on Twitter at hannahclaireb. Thanks for everything you guys do. Have a good night.
We'll see you all over at timcast.com in about 1 minute. Thanks for hanging out.